What kind of show starts with two guys finding a magical keyboard in their bedroom and ends with a lollipop man sacrificing himself to save the entire universe? I mean, really think about that for a second. Think about the distance between those 2 points. A show that premiered on Cartoon Network on September 6th, 2010, with an episode called The Power, where Mordecai and Rigby accidentally send Skips to the moon using a stolen synthesizer. And then 8 seasons and over 260 episodes later, it ends with the literal fabric of reality being torn apart and one of the gentlest characters in animation history choosing to die so that existence itself can continue. That's regular show. And if you think you know everything about it, if you think it's just 80s references and my mom jokes and two slackers getting yelled at by a gumball machine, I need you to stick around tonight. Because we are going to go through every single theory, every hidden connection, every piece of evidence that the fans have been pulling apart for over a decade. And some of this stuff is going to change the way you look at this show forever. So if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable. Grab whatever you need. Because we're going to be here for a long time. And I promise you, this is going to be worth it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these for you. Just hit that button and come back whenever you want. We'll be here. Tonight we're covering everything. The acid trip theory and its direct connection to J.G. Quintel's CalArts short film. The park as purgatory. Pops as a literal god. The theory that Skips has been living the same tragedy on loop for centuries. The idea that Benson is the most broken character on the show and nobody talks about it. The hidden timeline inconsistencies that suggest something much darker is happening beneath the surface. The finale's cosmic implications and what it actually means when Pop says "jolly good show" at the very end. All of it. Every layer. We're peeling this thing back until there's nothing left. And here's what I want you to keep in mind as we go through all of this. Regular Show was created by J.G. Quintel, a guy who graduated from the California Institute of the Arts in 2006. He voiced Mordecai himself. The show won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Short Format Animated Program in 2012 for the episode Eggcellent. It ran for 8 seasons on Cartoon Network, from 2010 to 2017, right alongside Adventure Time, during what people now call the Cartoon Network Renaissance. This wasn't some throwaway show. This was a cultural landmark that hid some of the most ambitious storytelling in animation history inside a package that looked like two dudes trying not to get fired from a park job. And the theories that fans have built around it, they're not random. They're not reaching. A lot of them are backed by real evidence, real production history, and real choices that Quintel and his team made deliberately. So let's start where every regular show theory conversation starts. Let's start with the one that changed everything. The acid trip theory. You've heard it, everybody's heard it. The idea that the entire show, all of it, every supernatural escalation, every demon, every cosmic entity, every time Mordecai and Rigby tried to return a library book and ended up fighting for their lives against some interdimensional being, all of it is just one long acid trip that never ended. And the thing is, this theory didn't come from nowhere. It didn't come from some fan just looking at the show and thinking, well, this is weird. Must be drugs. It came from the source material itself. It came from a student film that J.G. Quintel made at CalArts called 2 in the AM PM. And I need to talk about this film because it is the foundation of everything. 2 in the AM PM was made in 2006. It's a short, rough, animated film that Quintel created as part of CalArts' 48-hour animation competitions, where students would draw a word from a hat and then rush to make a short film based on it. The film features 2 convenience store employees working a late-night shift. They're bored out of their minds. And then one of them eats a bunch of candy laced with what is very clearly acid. And what happens next? They start hallucinating. Their bodies transform. And here's the part that makes the theory real. The part that turns it from speculation into something you can actually point to. One of them transforms into a blue jay. The other transforms into a gumball machine. Mordecai and Benson. Right there, in a short film about an acid trip. The character designs that would become 2 of regular show's main cast originated in a literal drug hallucination sequence. Now look, I've gone back and watched this short multiple times, It was accepted into the 2007 Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Animation Festival. It was voiced by Quintel himself and Sam Marine, who would go on to voice Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man in regular show. Sam Marine, by the way, voiced 3 of the show's main characters. 3. That's an incredible amount of range from one actor, and people don't talk about it enough. But back to the short. The connection between 2 in the AM PM and regular show isn't subtle. It's direct. Quintel took these character designs from a drug trip narrative and built an entire show around them. So the theory goes like this. Everything we see in regular show, every impossible escalation, every time reality bends and breaks around Mordecai and Rigby, it's all the acid trip from 2 in the AM PM continuing. The characters never came down. The hallucination never ended. The park, the job, the friends, the enemies, the cosmic battles, all of it is happening inside the mind of someone who ate drug-laced candy in a gas station in 2006 and never came back to reality. And honestly, there's a part of me that finds this theory compelling, because think about the show's structure. Think about what happens in a typical regular show episode. Mordecai and Rigby are given a mundane task. Set up chairs, return a tape, rake the leaves. And then something goes catastrophically wrong, and suddenly they're fighting a demon, or trapped in another dimension, or battling a giant head in a video game competition. Every single time. The mundane becomes the insane. And that escalation pattern, that specific rhythm of normal to impossible, it maps perfectly onto what a drug hallucination would feel like if it was continuous and sustained. The real world is still there, underneath, trying to peek through. The park, the job, the boss yelling at you. But it's been completely overtaken by this hallucinatory overlay, where everything is bigger and stranger and more dangerous than it has any right to be. But here's where I push back on this theory. And I think this is important. I don't think the acid trip reading is what Quintel intended for the show itself. Yes, the character designs originated in that short. Yes, the connection is there. But regular show is doing something much more interesting than just being a sustained hallucination. The escalation formula isn't random. It isn't the chaos of a drug trip. It's a metaphor. Every time Mordecai and Rigby's small choices blow up into cosmic consequences, the show is telling you something real about growing up. It's saying that the things that feel small when you're young, the job you don't take seriously, the friend you take for granted, the girl you can't talk to, those things have consequences that feel enormous. That's the escalation. That's what the supernatural chaos represents, not acid. Adulthood. The terrifying realization that your choices matter more than you thought they did. I actually have a theory about this that I've never heard anyone else bring up. I think Quintel kept the visual connection to 2 in the AM PM deliberately. Not because he wanted people to think the show was a drug trip, but because he wanted that layer to exist as a kind of origin mythology. Like, the show knows where it came from. The DNA is right there. And that self-awareness, that willingness to let the audience trace the show back to something genuinely subversive, is part of what makes regular show feel dangerous in a way that other Cartoon Network shows don't. It's a show that started as a drug joke and evolved into one of the most emotionally mature animated series ever made. And it never pretended otherwise. But look, the acid trip theory is just the surface. It's the one everybody knows. It's tier 1 of the iceberg, if you will. And we've got a long way to go before we hit the bottom. Because the deeper you dig into regular show's mythology, the stranger things get. Let's talk about the park itself. Because there's a theory that the park where Mordecai and Rigby work isn't just a park. It's purgatory. And before you roll your eyes, before you think, oh great, another purgatory theory just like Lost and every other show, hear me out. Because the evidence here is actually kind of unsettling. Think about who lives in the park. You've got Mordecai and Rigby, 2 guys in their early 20s who seem completely stuck. They can't move forward. They can't grow up. They're trapped in this endless cycle of work and slacking off and consequences and reset. Every episode, things go wrong. Things get fixed. And then the next day, it all starts over again. Nothing changes. Nobody leaves. Nobody moves on. For the first several seasons of this show, the park is a closed system. The same characters, the same house, the same grounds, the same job. Day after day after day. Now think about the other characters. Skips is immortal. He literally cannot die. He made a deal that keeps him alive forever. and we'll get into the heartbreaking reason why later. But in the context of this theory, his immortality means he's the one character who is explicitly trapped in an existence he can never leave. High Five Ghost is a ghost. I mean, it's right there in the name. He's already dead. That's not subtext, that's text. Muscle Man looks barely human. Benson is a gumball machine. Pops is a lollipop. These aren't normal people. These are beings that exist in some in-between state. Something that looks like life, but isn't quite. And then there's death. Actual death. Death shows up as a recurring character in regular show. He's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got a job, and he interacts with the park crew like they're old acquaintances. In the Season 2 episode, Over the Top, Skips accidentally kills Rigby during an arm wrestling match, and Death shows up to collect his soul. And the way Death talks to the park crew, casually, familiarly, almost bored, it's like this isn't the first time they've had this conversation. It's like Death has always been around. He's not a stranger, he's a neighbor. The purgatory theory suggests that the park is a space between life and death where these characters are being tested. They're given opportunities to grow, to change, to prove that they deserve to move on. And the escalation formula, the mundane task that becomes a cosmic crisis, that's the test. Every episode is a trial. Can Mordecai and Rigby handle responsibility? Can they rise to the occasion when the stakes get impossibly high? And when they fail, what happens? Nothing. They reset. They wake up the next day and do it all over again. Like a cycle, like purgatory. I've rewatched the first 2 seasons with this theory in mind, and it genuinely changes the texture of the show. There's this sense of stasis in early regular show that people don't talk about enough. For all the insane things that happen, nothing ever really changes the status quo. Mordecai and Rigby don't get promoted. They don't get fired permanently. They don't leave the park. They exist in this static loop, and the show acknowledges it. Benson threatens to fire them almost every episode, and it never sticks. They destroy things, and things get rebuilt. People die and come back. The universe bends around the park like it's the center of something. And here's the thing that really gets me about this theory. The show eventually breaks the cycle. In the later seasons, things start to change. Characters grow. Relationships develop. Rigby goes back to school. Mordecai deals with real heartbreak. Muscle Man gets married. And in the finale, they leave the park. They literally, physically leave. The park goes to space. The status quo shatters. And in the epilogue, we see them 25 years later, living real lives, having moved on. If the park was purgatory, then the show is the story of these characters finally earning their freedom. They proved themselves. They grew up. They got out. Now, do I think J.G. Quintel sat down and said, I'm going to make a show about purgatory? Probably not. But I think the structural bones of the show, the static setting, the cyclical storytelling, the presence of death as a character, the eventual breaking free, I think all of that creates a reading that's hard to dismiss. And that's what makes these theories so fascinating to me. They're not about what the show intended. They're about what the show accidentally reveals about itself when you look at it sideways. Okay, so we've done the acid trip. We've done purgatory. Now let's talk about the theory that blew my mind the hardest when I first encountered it. And it's the one that the show itself eventually confirmed in the most ambitious way possible. Pops is a god. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I don't mean Pops is godlike or divine or whatever. I mean the theory, which existed in the fan community for years before the final season aired, is that Pops Maillard, the cheerful, naive, lollipop-headed man who lives in the house at the park and says, "Jolly good show," and laughs at butterflies, is literally a cosmic being of infinite power whose existence determines whether the universe lives or dies. And the show confirmed it. In Season 8, regular show revealed that Pops was born as Mega Cranus on a planet called Lollyland. He is the embodiment of pure good. And he has a twin brother, Anti-Pops, whose real name is Malum Cranus, who is the embodiment of pure evil. These two beings are fated to battle each other every 14 billion years. And every single time, their perfectly balanced powers cause the entire universe to reset. Everything that has ever existed gets wiped clean and started over. The Big Bang, the formation of galaxies, the evolution of life, all of it is just the gap between Pops and anti-Pops punching each other. I need you to think about that for a second. This is a show that started with two guys trying to set up chairs for a party, and it ends with the revelation that one of their coworkers is a fundamental force of the cosmos, whose personal choices determine whether reality itself continues to exist. That's not a theory anymore. That's canon. That's what actually happened. But here's what fascinates me about the Pops theory in its original form. Before the show confirmed it, fans had been noticing things about Pops for years. His innocence wasn't normal. No adult character in any show is that purely good without there being a reason. Pops doesn't get angry. He doesn't get jealous. He doesn't scheme or manipulate or even understand when other people are doing those things. He exists in a state of almost childlike purity that doesn't match anything else in the show's world. And fans started asking, why? What's the explanation for a character who is fundamentally good in a world that is constantly testing goodness? And then there were the little details. Pops is physically different from everyone else. His head is shaped like a lollipop. He has powers that the show hints at, but doesn't fully explain. In several episodes, Pops demonstrates abilities that go beyond anything the other characters can do. He can communicate with nature. He has moments of strange wisdom that come out of nowhere, and his father, Mr. Maillard, who owns the park, treats him with this specific combination of protection and fear that doesn't make sense if Pops is just his eccentric son. The revelation in the ice tape that Mr. Maillard is actually Pops' adoptive father, that he found Pops as a baby during a meteor expedition and raised him, recontextualizes everything. Mr. Maillard didn't just adopt a child. He found a cosmic entity and tried to give it a normal life. He built a park and hired people and created this entire world for Pops to exist in safely, knowing the whole time that his son was something beyond his understanding. And that's heartbreaking in a way that regular show doesn't get enough credit for. Mr. Maillard is gruff and mean and constantly yelling at Benson. But underneath all of that, he's a father who loves his son and is terrified of what his son might actually be. You know what's funny is, I think about Mr. Maillard a lot more than I probably should. He's not a character people focus on. He shows up, he yells, he leaves. But if you think about his position, if you think about what it means to raise a god, and know that eventually, that god is going to have to face something terrible, he might be one of the most tragic characters in the entire show, and nobody talks about him. But the Pops theory goes even deeper than just the reveal of his cosmic nature. Because here's a question the fans started asking once Season 8 laid everything out. If the universe resets every time Pops and anti-Pops fight, then how many times has this happened? The show says it's been happening every 14 billion years, which means there have been previous universes, previous versions of everything, previous Parks, previous Mordecais, previous Rigbys. The characters we've been watching for 8 seasons might not be the first versions of themselves. They might be iterations, copies, echoes of people who have lived and died countless times, reset each time by a battle they don't even know is coming. And that ties directly back into the purgatory theory, doesn't it? If the universe keeps resetting, then in a very real sense, nobody in this world has ever truly died. They just get recycled, reset, put back at the beginning. That's not life. That's not death. That's something in between. That's purgatory. I keep coming back to this point, but I think it's the key to everything. All of these theories connect. They're not separate ideas. They're different angles on the same truth. Regular show is a show about being stuck and learning to break free. Whether you read it as an acid trip or purgatory, or a cosmic cycle of death and rebirth, the core meaning is the same. These characters are trapped, and the whole show is the story of them finding a way out. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, because the solution that Pops finds in the finale isn't what anyone expected. When Pops and anti-Pops finally face each other in a regular epic final battle, the 3-part series finale that aired on January 16th, 2017, the park crew fights alongside Pops against anti-Pops and his forces. Death shows up. The Guardians of Eternal Youth show up. Characters from across the entire series come back for one final battle. Anti-Pops assumes his Titan form and starts erasing reality. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost are erased. Pops assumes his own Titan form to fight back. And for a moment, it looks like the cycle is going to repeat. They're going to punch each other. Their powers are going to cancel out, and the universe is going to reset again. But then, something happens that has never happened before. In all the billions of years this cycle has been repeating. Mordecai and Rigby. These two slackers who spent the entire show arguing about who has to do the dishes and trying to avoid getting fired, they realize what's happening. They realize that the only way to break the cycle is to do something different. Not to fight harder, not to find a bigger weapon, but to change the equation entirely. And Pops listens. In the moment when he's about to throw the punch that would reset everything again, Pops does something that Anti-Pops has never seen. He hugs him. This cosmic being of pure good wraps his arms around his brother, the embodiment of pure evil, and he chooses love over violence. And for a few seconds, Anti-Pops is so shocked that he actually considers stopping. He actually considers not destroying everything. And in that window, that tiny moment of hesitation, Pops pushes both of them into the sun. Pops dies. He sacrifices himself to break a cycle that has been running for longer than the universe has existed. And the way he does it, by choosing compassion over combat, by choosing to love the thing that wants to destroy him, that's the thesis of the entire show. Regular show started with two guys who avoided responsibility and escalated every problem into a crisis. And it ended with the purest character on the show choosing the hardest possible path, the path of sacrifice, to save everyone else. Growth. That's what the whole thing was about. Growing up enough to make the hard choice. And then the epilogue. God, the epilogue. We jump 25 years into the future. The park crew has a reunion. Mordecai and Rigby are 57 years old. They've lived entire lives. They have families. They've moved on. And they gather at the park, where there's now a statue of Mr. Maillard. And they talk about Pops. They remember him. They honor him. And the show cuts to what appears to be an afterlife, where Pops is watching everything on a VHS tape labeled Regular Show. He ejects the tape, looks at the screen, and says, "Jolly good show." I'm not going to pretend that doesn't hit me hard, because it does. Every time. The idea that the entire show was a story that Pops was watching from some kind of heaven, that he gave his life so that his friends could live, and now he gets to watch the beautiful lives they built. That's one of the most emotionally devastating endings in animation history. And it came from a show about two dudes who couldn't set up chairs. But here's the theory that comes out of that ending, and I think it's one of the most fascinating questions the show leaves us with. If Pops is watching the show on a VHS tape, then who made the tape? Is Regular Show literally a recording of events that happened in this universe? Is it a show within a show? Is Pops watching the same thing we've been watching? And if so, does that mean we, the audience, have been watching this story from Pop's perspective the entire time? Are we in the afterlife too, looking back on something beautiful that already ended? I don't have an answer to that. And honestly, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I still don't know. But that's what great storytelling does. It leaves you with questions that don't have clean answers. Questions that keep pulling you back. And that brings me to something I want to spend some real time on tonight, because I think it's the most underrated layer of Regular Show theory discussion. Not the cosmic stuff. Not the drugs in purgatory. The character theories. The ideas about who these people really are and what they're really going through beneath the surface comedy. Because when you start looking at the characters of Regular Show through a theoretical lens, through the question of what is this character actually about, the show transforms into something almost uncomfortably real. Let's start with Skips. Because the theory around Skips might be the most heartbreaking thing in the entire show. And the wild part is that it's not even really a theory. The show told us. It just told us so quietly that a lot of people missed it. Skips is an immortal Yeti who works as the park's groundskeeper. He's the guy everyone goes to when things get out of control, which in this show is every single episode. Need to fight a demon? Ask Skips. Need to break a curse? Ask Skips. Need to fix a hole in reality? Skips probably has a wrench that can do it. He's the competent one, the strong one, the reliable one. And for the first few seasons, that's all he is. He's a problem solver with enormous biceps and no backstory. And then the show gives us Skip's story. This is Season 5, Episode 22. and it aired on April 14th, 2014. And it's the episode that turns Skips from a supporting character into maybe the most tragic figure in the entire show. Here's what we learn. Skips wasn't always called Skips. His real name was Walks. He was born centuries ago, and he lived what appeared to be a relatively normal life until he met a woman named Mona. They fell in love. They started spending time together, walking everywhere, and eventually, they started skipping instead, just skipping, together, because they were happy, and that's what happy people do sometimes. They do silly things that only make sense to them, and then Mona died. She died protecting Walks from a villain named Clorgbane the Destroyer. During a confrontation, a slab of concrete fell, and Mona pushed Walks out of the way and was killed. And in the aftermath of her death, Walks was offered a deal. He could become immortal, so that every 157 years, when Clorgbane returned, he could fight him again. And Walks took the deal. Not because he wanted to live forever, not because he wanted power, because fighting Clorgbane was the last thing connecting him to the person he loved. And he changed his name to Skips, because skipping was the thing he and Mona did together. And he wanted to carry that with him for all of eternity. And here's the part that gets me. Every time you see Skips in the show, every time he skips instead of walking, which is every single scene he's in, he's honoring a dead woman. That's not a quirky character trait. It's a monument to grief. Every skip is an act of remembrance. Every skip is Skip saying, I haven't forgotten you. I will never forget you. And he does this forever. That's the deal. He skips forever, and he fights forever, and he loses everyone he cares about forever, because the people around him age and die, and he doesn't. The theory that builds on this is that Skips' immortality isn't a gift, it's a curse, and the show supports this reading completely. In Over the Top, when Skips accidentally kills Rigby and has to arm wrestle death to get his soul back, look at how Skips reacts. He's not panicked. He's not surprised. He's tired. He's been through this before, not with Rigby specifically, but with other people, in other centuries. He's watched people die over and over again, and he's always the one left standing. That's not heroic. That's exhausting. That's agonizing. And you know what I think about sometimes? I think about how Skips must feel watching Mordecai and Rigby every day. These two young guys who are wasting their time, who don't appreciate what they have, who take their friendship for granted because they assume it'll always be there. Skips knows it won't. Skips knows that everything ends. He's been alive long enough to watch civilizations rise and fall, and yet he doesn't say anything. He doesn't lecture them. He just fixes things when they break and goes back to his room. Because what would he even say? How do you explain to someone who thinks they have all the time in the world that they don't? That's not a theory. That's a reading of the character that the show earns through careful, deliberate storytelling. And I think it's one of the most profound things regular show ever did. They took a character who could have been just the strong guy and gave him a sadness that's almost unbearable if you stop and think about it. There's a fan theory that takes this even further, and I think it's worth exploring. The theory is that Skips has been through versions of the park crew before, not in the cosmic reset sense that we talked about with Pops, but in the personal sense. The theory suggests that over his centuries of immortality, Skips has befriended groups of people, cared about them, watched them age and die, and then moved on to the next group. Mordecai and Rigby aren't the first young guys he's watched grow up. They're just the latest in a long line of people he's loved and lost. And that's why he's so calm. That's why he doesn't panic when things go wrong. He's seen it all before. He knows how this story ends. It always ends the same way. Everyone leaves except him. I've rewatched several Skips episodes putting this together, and the subtlety in the writing is incredible. There are these tiny moments where Skips looks at the other characters with this expression that's not quite sadness, not quite acceptance, but something in between. It's the face of someone who knows a secret that would destroy you if he told you. And I think the secret is simply, I've been here before, and I'll be here after you're gone. Okay, I need to shift gears here, because we've been in some heavy emotional territory, and I want to get into a theory that's equally fascinating, but hits differently. Let's talk about Benson. The theory about Benson is one of my favorites, because it reframes the entire show. Here it is in its simplest form. Benson isn't the villain of regular show. He's the protagonist. Think about it. From the very first episode, Benson is positioned as the antagonist. He's the boss. He yells. He threatens to fire Mordecai and Rigby. He turns red with anger. He's the obstacle, the authority figure, the fun police. And when you're watching the show as a kid, or as a teenager, that's how you see him. He's the bad guy. He's the one ruining everything. But rewatch the show as an adult, and Benson becomes the most relatable character in the entire cast. He's a park manager. He has employees who don't do their jobs. His boss, Mr. Maillard, doesn't respect him, constantly forgets his name, and threatens to shut down the park if things don't improve. Benson is middle management in the purest, most soul-crushing sense. He's responsible for everything and in control of nothing. He can't fire Mordecai and Rigby because Mr. Maillard won't let him. He can't quit because this is all he has. He's stuck. And every single day, he shows up and tries to make things work. And every single day, his employees blow something up, or unleash a demon, or rip a hole in the fabric of reality because they couldn't be bothered to set up some chairs. And here's the backstory detail that makes the Benson theory devastating. Before he was a park manager, Benson was a musician. He was a drummer. He performed in a band called Heir to the Throne, where he apparently performed a legendary drum solo on a 150-piece drum kit. He had talent. He had passion. He had a creative life. And then at some point, for reasons the show never fully explains, he gave all of that up and became a manager at a park. The theory is that Benson represents every creative person who gave up on their dream and settled for a real job. He's not angry because he's a bad person. He's angry because he used to be something more. And now he spends his days chasing after two 20-somethings who have the freedom he doesn't have anymore. Mordecai and Rigby slack off, and Benson rages, and the show plays it for comedy. But underneath the comedy, there's this incredibly sad person who is watching younger versions of himself waste the opportunities he wishes he still had. And this connects to another piece of Benson's character. In Stick Hockey, the Season 3 premiere that aired on September 19th, 2011, we learn that Benson used to be a stick hockey master known as Death Dragon. He had an apprentice named Dave who was killed by a rival player named Chong. Benson quit stick hockey after Dave's death and spent years refusing to confront that trauma. That episode ends with Benson finally facing Chong and winning, avenging Dave 10 years later. But the theory points out that this is a pattern for Benson. He finds something he's passionate about. Something happens that hurts him, and he retreats. Drumming, stick hockey, even his personal relationships. Benson is a character defined by retreat, by giving up. And the park job isn't just his career, it's his hiding place. I think there's something really important in the way the show handles Benson's anger too. Because here's the thing. Benson yells and screams and threatens, but he never actually follows through. He never fires Mordecai and Rigby. He never quits. He never leaves. And the theory suggests that this is because, on some level, Benson needs them. Not because they're good employees, obviously, but because they represent something he's lost. They're reckless and irresponsible and alive in a way that Benson isn't anymore. And as much as he resents them for it, he can't bring himself to cut them off, because watching them live, fearlessly, is the closest he gets to feeling that way himself. This is one of those episodes that I think about randomly at like 2 a.m. Not a specific episode actually, but the overall arc of Benson's character. Because the show does eventually let Benson grow. By the later seasons, Benson and Mordecai and Rigby develop a genuine mutual respect. They stop seeing each other as antagonists and start seeing each other as people. And that growth is so gradual, so carefully paced across 8 seasons, that you almost don't notice it happening. But when you look back at Season 1 Benson and compare him to Season 8 Benson, the difference is enormous. He's still the same person, but he's softer. He's found some peace. And I think the theory is right that Benson's journey is the show's most underrated arc, because it's the most realistic one. It's not about cosmic battles or supernatural powers. It's about a guy learning to stop being angry about the life he didn't get and start appreciating the life he has. But here's where the Benson theories get wild, because there's a darker version that I want to address. Some fans have theorized that Benson is clinically depressed, and that his anger is actually a mask for a much deeper emotional crisis. The evidence they point to includes his isolation, his inability to maintain relationships, his fixation on work as the only thing giving him purpose, and his repeated cycles of rage followed by exhaustion. And look, I'm not qualified to diagnose a cartoon character, but I think it's worth acknowledging that the show writes Benson with a complexity that goes beyond angry boss. There's something genuinely wounded about him. And the fact that regular show can make you feel that way about a character who is literally a gumball machine tells you everything about how good the writing is. And that leads us to something I've been wanting to talk about. Because if Benson's theory is about the tragedy of giving up your dreams, there's another character whose theory is about the tragedy of never being seen for who you really are. And that character is Muscle Man. Okay, let me just say this up front. When regular show first started, I could not stand Muscle Man. And I know I'm not alone in that. He's loud. He's gross. His entire personality for the first couple of seasons is "my mom jokes" and making everyone around him uncomfortable. He's the character you tolerate because the rest of the show is good, not the character you watch the show for. And then something happens. Gradually, without fanfare, without a big announcement, regular show starts revealing who Muscle Man actually is underneath all the bravado and the terrible jokes. And the theory that fans have built around this transformation is that Muscle Man's obnoxiousness isn't just comedy. It's a defense mechanism. It's armor. And underneath that armor is one of the most emotionally vulnerable characters in the entire show. The turning point for a lot of fans is Trucker Hall of Fame. In this episode, Muscle Man's father, Muscle Dad, dies. And the show handles it with this remarkable combination of humor and genuine sadness. Benson asks Mordecai and Rigby to go with Muscle Man to spread the ashes of his father's hat at the Trucker Hall of Fame. Along the way, they discover that Muscle Man's father wasn't actually a trucker. He was a forklift driver. He lied to his son about what he did for a living because he wanted Muscle Man to be proud of him. And the thing that kills me about that episode, the part that really gets me, is that Muscle Man doesn't care. When he finds out his dad was a forklift driver, not a trucker, it doesn't change anything. He still loved his dad. The lie doesn't diminish the love. And that's such a mature, such an emotionally intelligent response that it completely reframes who Muscle Man is as a character. This is a guy who everyone dismisses as the dumb, gross one, and when confronted with something genuinely painful, he responds with grace. The theory extends to Muscle Man's relationship with Starla, and this is another area where the show surprises you. Muscle Man and Starla are presented initially as a gross joke. They look similar. They make out in public. Everyone is disgusted by them. But as the show goes on, their relationship is revealed to be one of the most stable and genuine in the entire series. Muscle Man proposes to Starla in The End of Muscle Man. They get married in Dumped at the Altar. And in the finale's epilogue, they have numerous children together. They built a life. A real, lasting, loving life. And the theory is that Muscle Man's "my mom" jokes, his loudness, his need to be the center of attention, all of it comes from a deep insecurity that the people around him will leave if they see who he really is. His father lied about his job because he was insecure. His brother was more popular and more likable. Muscle Man grew up in the shadow of people he loved, feeling like he wasn't enough, and he compensated by being the loudest person in the room. If you're making everyone laugh, or at least making everyone react, then at least they're looking at you. At least they know you're there. I've watched this character's arc probably more than any other character's arc in the show, and it hits different every time. Because the show lets Muscle Man grow without losing who he is. He still tells "my mom" jokes in the final season. He's still loud and gross, but the jokes become gentler. The grossness becomes endearing. And by the end, you realize that Muscle Man was never the character you needed to tolerate. He was the character you needed to understand. There's this specific moment in the finale when Muscle Man and High Five Ghost are erased by anti-pops. Just erased from existence. And the look on Muscle Man's face right before it happens, I need you to think about what just happened here. Because this is a character who spent the entire show demanding attention, demanding that people notice him. and in his final moment, he's completely silent. He doesn't make a joke. He doesn't yell. He just looks at his best friend, and then they're gone. That silence is louder than any of his jokes ever were. High Five Ghost deserves a moment here too, because there's a theory about him that connects to something deeper in the show. High Five Ghost is, as I mentioned, literally a ghost. He's dead. He died at some point before the show started, and now he exists as a spectral hand with a face. And the theory is that High Five Ghost represents the part of friendship that persists after everything else fades. He's always there. He's always beside Muscle Man. He doesn't need much. He doesn't ask for much. He's just present. And in a show about growing up and moving on, High Five Ghost is the reminder that some connections don't die. Some friendships transcend everything, even death. It's a simple theory, but I think it's beautiful. And I think it's supported by the way the show handles High Five Ghost's character. He's never the focus. He's never the star, but he's always there. Always. In every group shot, in every crisis, in every celebration, he's the friend who shows up. And sometimes, honestly, that's the most important thing a friend can do. All right, we've been going for a while, and if you're still with me, I appreciate it. And if you've been drifting in and out, that's okay too. That's what these are for. But I want to get into some of the more obscure theories now, the ones that don't get talked about as much, but are equally fascinating when you dig into them. Let's talk about the timeline, because there's a theory that regular show's timeline doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense on purpose. Here's the thing. Regular show is set in what appears to be the present day. The characters have cell phones in later seasons. They reference contemporary culture. The world around them looks like modern America. But the show is also drenched in 80s culture. The music, the technology, the references, the aesthetic. VHS tapes, cassette players, arcade machines, synthesizers. The show exists in this temporal no man's land where the present and the 1980s coexist simultaneously, and nobody within the show acknowledges that this is strange. The theory is that the park exists outside of normal time, not in a supernatural sense, necessarily, but in an emotional one. The 80s references aren't just nostalgia bait. They're the emotional language of the show. J.G. Quintel grew up listening to 80s rock music, playing 8-bit video games, watching Sylvester Stallone movies, and John Hughes films. He's talked about this in interviews, about how he'd listen to old rock and 80s stuff on the radio while driving to work, about how those influences shaped the show's DNA. And when regular show uses 80s aesthetics, it's not just because they look cool. It's because those aesthetics carry specific emotional weight. Think about the montage sequences. Regular show does montages constantly. Characters will be working or training or falling in love, and the show will cut to a montage set to a synth-heavy 80s track. And those montages feel different from anything else in the show. They feel earnest. They feel genuine. The irony drops away, and for a few seconds, the show is being completely sincere about how its characters feel. The timeline theory suggests that the 80s aren't just an influence on the show. They're the show's emotional default state. When things get real, when the characters feel something true, the show reverts to the 80s. Because that's where Quintel's emotional truth lives. That's the language he uses to express feeling. And the theory goes further, suggesting that the characters are all living in some form of arrested emotional development, where they're stuck in the emotional landscape of the 1980s. They can't grow up because they can't move past this aesthetic, this feeling, this specific kind of nostalgia, for something that might never have existed in the first place. And I think there's real truth to that, not just for the characters, but for the audience. Regular show aired during a period when 80s nostalgia was becoming a dominant cultural force. Stranger Things, Ready Player One, synthwave music, retro gaming. The culture was obsessed with looking backward. And regular show was part of that conversation, but it was also commenting on it. Because the show doesn't just use 80s references. It questions them. It asks what it means to be trapped in the past, what it costs to keep looking backward instead of forward. I actually want to bring up a specific 80s reference that I think perfectly illustrates this theory. In the Season 7 episode, The Lunch Club, the entire plot is a whole episode reference to the 1985 film The Breakfast Club. Rigby and Benson are forced into a situation where one of them must resign, and they spend the episode in this confined space, breaking down their walls and being honest with each other. The episode ends with them walking off to Don't You Forget About Me, with Rigby pumping his fist in the air, exactly like John Bender at the end of the original film. And that image, that deliberate recreation of one of the most iconic moments in 80s cinema, it's not just a reference, it's a statement. It's the show saying, this is our emotional vocabulary. This is how we express what these characters feel, through the lens of the movies and the music that shaped us. And here's where the timeline theory gets really interesting. If the 80s aesthetics are the show's emotional language, then the shift to space in Season 8 becomes even more significant. When the park goes to space, the 80s references don't disappear, but they're diluted. The show's visual language changes. The world gets bigger and stranger. And the theory suggests that this represents the characters finally breaking free of their nostalgic prison. They're not in the park anymore. They're not in the 80s anymore. They're in the future. They're moving forward. And that transition from a world defined by looking backward to a world defined by looking forward is the show's ultimate statement about growing up. You can love the past. You can honor it. You can carry it with you. But at some point, you have to leave. Remember what I said earlier about the park being purgatory? This is where that theory and the timeline theory intersect. If the park is a place of stasis where nothing changes, then the 80s aesthetic is the visual representation of that stasis. The characters are stuck in a time that isn't theirs, surrounded by technology and culture from a decade before most of them were born, and they can't move forward until they let go. The park is purgatory, and the 80s are its wallpaper. Okay, I want to pivot to something that I think is one of the most overlooked theories in the regular show community, and it has to do with the relationship between Mordecai and Rigby. Not the friendship itself, which is obviously central to the show, but the theory about what that friendship actually represents. The theory is this: Mordecai and Rigby are not two separate characters. They're two halves of the same person. Now, before you dismiss this, hear me out, because the evidence is kind of compelling. Think about how Mordecai and Rigby function in the show. They're almost never apart. They live together. They work together. They share a room. They experience everything as a unit. And their personalities are perfectly complementary, in a way that feels less like two different people and more like one person split in two. Mordecai is the responsible one, the one who wants to do the right thing, the one who cares about what other people think. Rigby is the impulsive one, the one who makes bad decisions, the one who doesn't care about consequences. Together, they form a complete person. Separately, they're incomplete, and the show acknowledges this. There are multiple episodes where Mordecai and Rigby are separated, and in every case, both of them struggle without the other. Mordecai becomes boring and directionless without Rigby's chaos. Rigby becomes destructive and lost without Mordecai's grounding influence. They need each other, not just emotionally, but structurally. They can't function as individuals. The theory suggests that this isn't just good character writing. It's intentional symbolism. Mordecai and Rigby represent the two forces inside every young person: the desire to be responsible and the desire to be free. The tension between growing up and staying young. The push and pull between doing what you should and doing what you want. And the show's plot, which is essentially an ongoing negotiation between these two impulses, is a metaphor for the internal conflict that everyone goes through in their 20s. Should I get a real job? Should I blow it off? Should I take this relationship seriously? Should I just have fun? Mordecai and Rigby have this argument every episode, and they're really arguing with themselves. And here's the detail that makes this theory click for me. In 2 in the AM PM, Quintel's CalArts short that started everything, the two convenience store workers who transform into a Blue Jay and a gumball machine are also a matched pair. They're co-workers who are bored, who are stuck, who are looking for something more. They're the same type of person in the same type of situation. And then the acid splits them, literally. The drug trip transforms them into different creatures, different beings, and separates them into two distinct characters. If you read 2 in the AM PM as the origin story of regular show, then Mordecai and Rigby are literally one person who is split into two by a hallucinogenic experience. Look, I know that's a stretch. I know that's probably not what Quintel was going for, but I think the fact that the reading is even possible tells you something about how carefully these characters were constructed. Mordecai and Rigby feel like two halves of the same coin because they were designed to be complementary. And that complementary design, whether intentional or not, creates a character dynamic that's deeper than most shows even attempt. The other theory about Mordecai and Rigby that I want to address is more straightforward, but equally important. It's the theory that their friendship is the most honest depiction of male friendship in animation. Not the most dramatic, not the most cinematic, the most honest. Because here's what Mordecai and Rigby's friendship actually looks like when you strip away the supernatural stuff. They love each other, but they don't say it. They compete constantly. They get jealous of each other's achievements. They betray each other's trust and then forgive each other without ever really talking about it. They have fights that feel real, not sitcom fights, but the kind of fights where somebody says something they actually mean and it hangs in the air for days. And they stay friends through all of it. Not because they're written to be friends, but because the show earns that friendship through seasons of shared experience. The theory points to several key episodes as evidence. In Excellent, Season 3, Episode 17, which aired on February 27th, 2012, and won the Emmy, Rigby falls into a coma after eating an omelet despite being allergic to eggs. And Mordecai, who has spent the entire series making fun of Rigby and getting annoyed by him and treating him like an afterthought, Mordecai drops everything and fights to save him. He enters a life-threatening eating challenge. He risks his own health. He does all of this for a hat, a stupid trucker hat that Rigby wanted. And the reason it hits so hard is that Mordecai doesn't make a speech about how much Rigby means to him. He doesn't have a big emotional moment. He just does it. Because that's what you do for your friend. You don't talk about it. You just show up. And I think about the Dawn episode from Season 1 a lot too. This is the episode where we meet Rigby's younger brother, Dawn, who is taller, more charming, more successful, and better liked than Rigby in every way. Everyone loves Dawn. Dawn gives great hugs, which he calls sugar, and Rigby hates him. Not because Dawn is a bad person, but because Dawn's existence is a constant reminder of everything Rigby isn't. And Mordecai's role in this episode is interesting because he likes Dawn. He thinks Dawn is great. But when it matters, when Rigby is genuinely hurting, Mordecai takes Rigby's side. Not because Rigby is right, but because Rigby is his friend. And sometimes, being a friend means standing with someone even when they're wrong. That's the theory in action. Mordecai and Rigby's friendship isn't aspirational. It's descriptive. It shows you what real male friendship looks like, with all of its flaws and silences and unspoken rules. And I think that's why the show resonated with so many people. Not because of the explosions and the demons, but because underneath all of that, there were two friends who felt real. Okay, let's shift into some truly obscure theory territory now. Because we've covered the big ones, the theories that everyone talks about, but there's a whole layer beneath those that gets into some really specific, really detailed readings of the show that I find fascinating. The Rigby intelligence theory. This one is subtle and kind of heartbreaking. The theory is that Rigby isn't actually dumb. He's been conditioned to believe he's dumb by a lifetime of being compared to people who are better than him. And he's internalized that belief so deeply that he actually performs below his real capability. The evidence for this is scattered across the series. Rigby dropped out of high school because he cheated and got expelled. But the show reveals that the reason he cheated wasn't that he couldn't do the work. It was that he was so terrified of failing that he took a shortcut. That's not a dumb person's decision. That's an anxious person's decision. Someone who is actually unintelligent wouldn't care about failing. Rigby cared so much that he sabotaged himself. And then look at what happens later in the series. In Season 7, Rigby goes back to school. He works hard. He studies. He graduates. Rigby's graduation day special, the Season 7 finale, is a half-hour special that ends with the park being launched into space. But the emotional core of the episode is Rigby earning his diploma. And here's the thing that struck me when I rewatched it. Rigby doesn't just pass. He does well. He puts in the effort, and he succeeds. Which means the ability was always there. It was always in him. He just never believed it was. The theory suggests that Rigby's arc across the entire series is about overcoming the false belief that he's not good enough. His brother Don is more successful. His best friend Mordecai is taller, cooler, and more talented. Everyone he knows seems to be better than him at everything. And Rigby responds to this by either giving up or by trying to cheat his way to success. But the show's thesis, the theory argues, is that Rigby's real journey isn't about becoming smarter or more talented. It's about learning that he was always enough. He just had to stop running from the work. And I think this connects to the show's broader theme about growing up. Because that's what growing up is, isn't it? It's not about becoming a different person. It's about stopping the behaviors that prevent you from being yourself. Rigby didn't become a new person when he graduated. He became the person he always could have been, if he'd had the confidence to try. Here's another theory that I think deserves more attention, and it has to do with one of the show's most divisive storylines, the Mordecai love triangle. For those who don't remember, or for those who are trying to block it out, here's the summary. In the first 3 seasons of regular show, Mordecai is in love with Margaret, a Robin who works at the coffee shop. He can barely talk to her. He freezes up. He says stupid things. And the show milks this crush for comedy and for genuine emotional stakes. Eventually, Mordecai and Margaret get together in season 4. They kiss. They date. And then Margaret gets accepted to her dream college, Milton University, and she leaves. In the season 4 finale, Stake Me Amadeus, Margaret tells Mordecai she can't be his girlfriend and runs out of the restaurant in tears. It's devastating. And then CJ enters the picture. CJ first appeared in the season 3 episode, Yes Dude Yes, but she becomes a major character in seasons 5 and 6 as Mordecai's second girlfriend. CJ is different from Margaret. She's assertive, she's fun, she shares Mordecai's interests, and for a while, the relationship works. But then Margaret comes back, and instead of handling the situation like an adult, Mordecai fumbles it completely. He and Margaret kiss in front of CJ. A love triangle erupts. Feelings are hurt. Relationships are destroyed. And ultimately, Mordecai ends up alone. The theory about this storyline is that the show deliberately sabotaged Mordecai's romantic life to make a point about emotional maturity. The theory argues that Mordecai's failure in relationships isn't bad writing. It's the show's most honest statement about what it's like to be a young man who doesn't know what he wants. Because think about it. Mordecai's problem isn't that he can't find love. It's that he can't commit to a choice. When he's with Margaret, he's thinking about CJ. When he's with CJ, he's thinking about Margaret. He's not malicious. He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just paralyzed by indecision, by the fear that making a choice means closing a door forever. And that fear, that inability to commit, is one of the most realistic things the show ever depicted. I know people like this. You probably know people like this. People who aren't bad, who are genuinely kind, but who are so afraid of making the wrong choice that they end up hurting everyone around them by making no choice at all. And the show's resolution of this storyline is fascinating. Mordecai doesn't end up with Margaret. He doesn't end up with CJ. In the finale's epilogue, we see that Mordecai married a woman we've never met before, a bat hybrid artist he met at an art show. And people were furious about this when it aired. Who is this person? Why didn't he end up with Margaret? Why didn't he end up with CJ? But the theory argues that this is exactly the point. Mordecai couldn't end up with either of them because his relationship with both of them was defined by immaturity. He met them when he was young and confused and didn't know who he was. And by the time he grew up enough to be a good partner, those relationships were already ruined. The person he ultimately ends up with is someone he meets as a fully formed adult, after he's done the growing that the show is about. I think that's really smart. I think it's braver than giving the audience what they wanted. And I think the theory is right that the love triangle, as messy and frustrating as it was to watch, was one of the most deliberately constructed storylines in the entire show. And honestly, this connects back to the Benson theory too. Benson failed in his personal relationships for the same reason Mordecai did: an inability to be vulnerable at the right time. And Rigby's relationship with Eileen works because Rigby, despite all his flaws, is actually the most emotionally transparent character in the show. He doesn't hide how he feels. He might express it badly, but he expresses it. And the show rewards that honesty by giving him the healthiest relationship in the cast. The theory extends to a broader claim about regular show's philosophy of love and relationships. The show suggests that successful relationships require emotional maturity, that you have to know who you are before you can be with someone else. And the characters who figure this out, Rigby with Eileen, Muscle Man with Starla, they find lasting love. The characters who don't, Mordecai in seasons 4 through 6, Benson throughout most of the series, they struggle. It's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And that's a remarkably mature message for a show that also features a man trying to fight a talking hot dog. Let me get into some more specific episode theories now, because there are individual episodes of regular show that contain hidden layers that most people miss on a first viewing. And I've spent an embarrassing amount of time cataloging these. Let's start with The Power, the very first episode. Season 1, Episode 1, September 6th, 2010. Mordecai and Rigby find a magical keyboard that lets them do anything they want. They use it to send skips to the moon, to fix a hole in their wall, to try to get a raise from Benson. And eventually, the keyboard's power gets out of control, and they have to deal with the consequences. The theory about The Power is that it's not just a pilot episode. It's a thesis statement for the entire series. The keyboard is regular show's central metaphor in miniature. Two young guys discover that they have power, the ability to change their world, but they use it irresponsibly. They don't think about consequences. They don't consider how their actions affect other people. And the result is chaos. The power spirals out of control. Things get worse instead of better. And they have to scramble to fix what they broke. That's every episode. That's the formula. But The Power lays it out explicitly, with the magical keyboard serving as a literal representation of agency. Mordecai and Rigby have the power to change their lives. We all do. But power without responsibility, without maturity, without consideration for others, leads to disaster. And the show spends 8 seasons exploring what happens when these two guys slowly, painfully learn to use their power wisely. There's another detail in The Power that fans have pointed out, and I think it's significant. The keyboard was stolen from a wizard. Rigby literally stole it from someone who was relieving himself in a bush. And the theory notes that this is how Mordecai and Rigby approach most of their solutions. They take shortcuts. They don't earn things. They steal. They cheat. They find workarounds. And the show's supernatural consequences are directly proportional to the shortcut they took. The bigger the shortcut, the bigger the disaster. It's karma. It's cosmic justice. The universe punishes laziness by making the solution 10 times harder than the original problem would have been. And I think that reading is supported by episodes across the entire series. In Bet to Be Blonde, from season 3, Mordecai loses a bet to Rigby and has to dye his hair blonde, which leads to him joining a cult of blonde-haired men that nearly destroys his friendship with Rigby. He took a shortcut by accepting a bet he shouldn't have taken, and the universe escalated the consequences. In Do Me a Solid, from season 2, Rigby agrees to help Mordecai on a date in exchange for 10 favors, and those favors spiral into increasingly humiliating and dangerous situations. Another shortcut. Another escalation. The pattern holds. And here's the meta-theory that ties all of this together. The theory suggests that the magical elements of regular show aren't random. They're a narrative mechanism for accountability. In the real world, when you take a shortcut, the consequences are usually gradual and subtle. You don't study for a test. You get a bad grade. Your GPA drops. You don't get into the college you wanted. It's slow and undramatic. But in regular show, the consequences are immediate and spectacular. You don't set up the chairs? A demon shows up. You use a magical keyboard to avoid doing work? You accidentally send someone to the moon. The show compresses the cause and effect relationship between laziness and consequence into 11-minute episodes, making the link visceral and undeniable. That's not random. That's not LOL so random humor. That's deliberate storytelling. And I think it's one of the reasons the show works as well as it does. Because even if you don't consciously register the metaphor, you feel it. You feel the connection between the characters' choices and the chaos that follows. And that feeling is what makes Regular Show more than just a cartoon about weird stuff happening. It's a cartoon about why weird stuff happens when you don't take your life seriously. Alright, I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most underexplored areas of Regular Show theory. The show's relationship with death. Not Death the character, although we'll circle back to him. Death the concept. Regular Show is a show where people die, not in the oh no they're in danger way that most cartoons handle mortality. Actually die. Permanently. And the show treats those deaths with a weight and a seriousness that is completely at odds with its comedic surface. Let's count. Pops dies in the finale. That's the big one. But before that, Muscle Man's father dies in Trucker Hall of Fame. Mr. Maillard dies. Characters throughout the series are killed in battle or erased from existence. In Over the Top, Rigby literally dies and has to be won back from death in an arm wrestling contest. And while Rigby comes back, the episode doesn't treat his death as a joke. There's a real moment of horror when it happens. Mordecai is devastated. Benson is stunned. The show plays it straight for just long enough to make you feel the weight of it before the supernatural rescue mission kicks in. The theory is that Regular Show uses death as its most powerful narrative tool, and that the show's willingness to kill characters, especially in a medium where death is usually temporary and meaningless, is what gives it its emotional credibility. When Pops dies in the finale, it hits as hard as it does because the show has established that death is real in this world. People don't always come back. The stakes are genuine. And because the stakes are genuine, the emotions are genuine. There's a darker version of this theory that focuses on the show's earlier seasons. In seasons 1 through 3, death is played more for comedy. Characters die and come back. Death himself is a recurring joke character. But the theory argues that the show is gradually conditioning its audience. It starts with death as comedy, as something you laugh at, and then slowly, incrementally, it starts taking death more seriously. By the time you get to Trucker Hall of Fame and Muscle Dad's death, you're not laughing anymore. And by the time Pops sacrifices himself, you're crying. The show trained you to take death seriously by first making you comfortable with it, and then pulling the rug out. I think that's one of the smartest narrative strategies I've ever seen in a cartoon. And I don't think it gets enough credit. Most shows either treat death as permanently serious from the beginning or permanently unserious. Regular Show does both in sequence, and the transition from one to the other mirrors the audience's own transition from childhood to adulthood. When you're young, death is abstract. It's a concept. It happens in stories, but it doesn't feel real. And then someone you love dies, and suddenly it's the most real thing in the world. Regular Show replicates that exact emotional trajectory across its 8 seasons. That's not accidental. That's art. And this connects to the Skips theory we talked about earlier. Skips has been dealing with death for centuries. He's the character who already knows what the audience is slowly learning. And when you watch his scenes with this understanding, there's an added layer of sadness to everything he does. He's seen this movie before. He knows how it ends. And he keeps going anyway. Not because he's hopeful, but because stopping would mean dishonoring everyone he's lost. Let me talk about Death as a character for a minute, because the fans have some really interesting theories about him too. Death in Regular Show is voiced, and he's this rock and roll figure with a leather jacket and a motorcycle. He's not scary, he's not grim, he's just a dude doing his job. And the theory is that Death is the show's most honest character. Everyone else in Regular Show is hiding something. Mordecai hides behind his cool guy exterior. Rigby hides behind his bravado. Benson hides behind his anger. Muscle Man hides behind his jokes. But Death doesn't hide behind anything. He is exactly what he appears to be. He takes souls. He goes home. He loves his wife. He's got a kid who's a handful. He's just a working guy. And the theory extends to say that this is why Death treats the park crew so familiarly. He doesn't see them as mortals to be feared. He sees them as neighbors. People he'll interact with eventually in a professional capacity, sure. But in the meantime, why not be friendly? And there's something deeply comforting about that reading. In a show about the terror of growing up and the inevitability of change, Death is the one constant. He's not going anywhere. He'll be there when you need him. And he's not in a rush. I want to take a detour here because there's a production theory about regular show that I think adds an important context to everything we've been discussing. The theory is about the show's place in what fans and critics call the Cartoon Network Renaissance. Regular Show premiered on September 6th, 2010. Adventure Time had premiered on April 5th, 2010, just 5 months earlier. And these two shows, along with others that followed, fundamentally changed what Cartoon Network shows could be. They proved that animated shows aimed at young audiences could be emotionally complex, thematically ambitious, and creatively daring without sacrificing entertainment value. They opened the door for Steven Universe, Over the Garden Wall, and everything that came after. But the theory I want to focus on is about the relationship between Regular Show and Adventure Time specifically, because these shows are often grouped together, and for good reason. But the theory argues that they're actually doing opposite things with the same toolkit. Adventure Time starts small and gets cosmic. It begins as a goofy adventure show and gradually reveals an incredibly complex mythology involving nuclear wars, ancient civilizations, and the nature of existence itself. The show expands outward. Regular Show does the reverse. It starts cosmic and gets personal. Every episode begins with a supernatural escalation, but the resolution is always emotional. The demons and portals and cosmic entities are just the backdrop. The real story is always about friendship, or responsibility, or growing up. The show contracts inward, and the theory suggests that this inverse relationship was deliberate. That Quintel and Pendleton Ward, the creator of Adventure Time, were both responding to the same cultural moment. The desire for animated shows that could be more than just kids' entertainment, but they approached it from opposite directions. Adventure Time asks, what if a kid's show was secretly about the end of the world? Regular Show asks, what if a show about the end of the world was secretly about being a kid? I think both approaches work. I think they're both brilliant. But I've always been drawn more to Regular Show's method, because I think there's something more challenging about starting with spectacle and finding intimacy, rather than starting with intimacy and building to spectacle. It's harder to make people care about a friendship when there's a demon on screen. Regular Show does it anyway, and if you're still awake, I want to reward you with one of the most niche theories in the entire Regular Show fandom. This one is about the coffee shop. The coffee shop is where Margaret and Eileen work. It's where Mordecai goes to see Margaret. It's a recurring location throughout the series. And the theory is that the coffee shop is the real world leaking into the park's supernatural space. Think about what happens at the coffee shop. Normal things. People drink coffee. They have conversations. Mordecai fumbles his words trying to talk to Margaret. Nobody gets attacked by demons at the coffee shop. There are no supernatural escalations. The coffee shop is the one location in Regular Show where things stay normal, where the rules of reality hold. And the theory suggests that this is because the coffee shop represents the outside world, the world beyond the park, the world that Mordecai and Rigby will eventually have to join. It's real life. And that's why Mordecai is drawn to it. He goes there not just because of Margaret, but because the coffee shop is the closest he can get to a normal life without actually leaving the park. It's his window into a world where things don't escalate, where conversations are just conversations, where a cup of coffee is just a cup of coffee. And when Margaret leaves for college, when the coffee shop stops being Mordecai's anchor to normalcy, that's when his life starts to unravel. The love triangle with CJ, the emotional confusion, the inability to commit, all of it starts after Margaret leaves, because his connection to the real world has been severed. He's fully in the park now. He's fully in the supernatural. And without that grounding influence, he spirals. I think that's a really elegant reading of the show's geography. The park is chaos. The coffee shop is order. Mordecai moves between them, trying to find balance. And the show's central tension, growing up versus staying young, is literally mapped onto the distance between these two locations. And here's where I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most brilliant structural choices JG Quintel made with regular show, and it connects to almost every theory we've discussed tonight. It's the choice to set the show in a park, not an apartment, not a school, not a workplace in the traditional sense. A park, an open, public, green space. And the theory is that the park setting isn't arbitrary. It's symbolic. Parks are places of transition. People don't live in parks. They visit them. They pass through. Kids play in parks, but they go home when the sun goes down. Teenagers hang out in parks when they don't have anywhere better to be. And the people who work in parks, the groundskeepers and the managers, they maintain a space that exists for other people's pleasure. They're caretakers of a transitional space. And that's exactly what Mordecai and Rigby are. They're caretakers of a transitional space. They maintain the park, this place where people come and go, while they themselves stay. They're stuck in a place that's designed for passing through. And the show's entire arc is about them eventually learning to pass through it too. To stop maintaining other people's transitions and start making their own. I've been thinking about this reading for a while, and it keeps getting deeper the more I look at it. The park is public space. It belongs to everyone and no one. And Mordecai and Rigby treat it like home, like it's theirs, and Benson keeps trying to remind them that it's not. It's their workplace. It's temporary, they're supposed to do their job and leave, but they can't leave because they don't know where else to go. And that's growing up in a nutshell, isn't it? That feeling of being somewhere that isn't quite yours, not quite ready to leave, not quite able to stay. All right, we've been on this journey for a while now, and I want to get into the finale theories in more detail, because there's more to unpack about a regular epic final battle than just the Pop's sacrifice. There are layers to that ending that fans are still debating years later. The first theory about the finale is the VHS theory, which we touched on earlier, but which deserves a deeper exploration. When Pop says "jolly good show" at the end, he's watching the events of the series on a VHS tape in what appears to be an afterlife. The tape is labeled regular show, and the theory asks, what is the significance of it being a VHS tape? VHS is 80s technology. It's obsolete. It's the technology of the past. And Pops is watching his friends' lives unfold on this outdated format, in this space that seems to be outside of time. The theory suggests that the VHS format is the show's final 80s reference, and that it carries a specific meaning. VHS tapes degrade. Every time you play them, the quality gets slightly worse. The image gets fuzzier. The sound gets muddier. They're impermanent. They decay. And the theory is that this impermanence is the point. Pops is watching a recording that will eventually degrade and disappear, just like memories, just like life. The show is saying that everything is temporary, even the record of everything that happened. And that's okay, because the value isn't in the permanence. It's in the watching. It's in the experience. It's in the jolly good show that Pop says at the end. He enjoyed it. It was good. And now it's over. I don't know if Quintel intended all of that, but the fact that it's there, the fact that the show chose VHS specifically, in a world where the characters have access to modern technology, in a finale that takes place partially in space, the deliberate choice to end on an image of outdated technology feels meaningful. It feels like a statement about how we relate to the past. We record it. We play it back. And eventually, the tape runs out. The second finale theory has to do with the epilogue's time skip and what it means for the rest of the theories we've discussed. The epilogue shows the park crew 25 years later. Mordecai is a painter married to a woman we've never met. Rigby and Eileen have children. Muscle Man and Starla have a large family. Everyone has moved on. They've left the park. They've grown up. And the theory is that this epilogue isn't just an ending. It's a deliberate refutation of every dark theory about the show. If the acid trip theory is true, the characters woke up. If the purgatory theory is true, they escaped. If the timeline theory is true, they moved past the 80s and into the future. The epilogue is the show saying, yes, you can read all of those layers into what we made, and we're okay with that. But the truth underneath all of it is simpler and more hopeful than any theory. These characters grew up. They lived. They found happiness. The end. And I think that's a really generous thing for a show to do. To acknowledge its own darkness and then to choose light. To say, we could have ended in tragedy, in ambiguity, in cosmic horror, but we chose to end with a barbecue, and old friends laughing, and a lollipop man in heaven, saying that it was all good. That's not a cop-out. That's courage. It takes more guts to choose a happy ending than a sad one, especially when your show has earned the right to be devastatingly sad. I want to spend some time now on theories about specific episodes that I think reveal hidden depths in the show. And I want to start with an episode that I don't think gets enough attention in theory discussions, even though it's one of the most popular episodes of the entire series. Excellent, Season 3, Episode 17, February 27th, 2012, the one that won the Emmy. The surface plot is simple. Rigby tries to eat a massive omelet at a restaurant to win a trucker hat that says, "I'm excellent." He has an allergic reaction to eggs and falls into a coma. Mordecai takes on the challenge to win the hat for Rigby. But the theory about excellent goes deeper. The theory is that this episode is about proving love through action, not words. Mordecai never tells Rigby he loves him. He never says, "You're my best friend, and I'd do anything for you." What he does is risk his own health and safety to win a stupid hat. Because the hat isn't stupid to Rigby. It matters to Rigby. And Mordecai's willingness to treat something that matters to Rigby as something that matters to him, that's the purest expression of love in the entire show. And here's the detail that elevates this episode from great to transcendent. At the end of the challenge, Mordecai has to choose the correct hat from a selection. If he picks the wrong one, he dies. The show has established this. A previous challenger named Jonathan Kimball chose the wrong hat, a crown, and died. This is literally a life or death decision. And Mordecai makes the right choice because he remembered what Rigby told him about the hat. He listened. He paid attention. In a show where Mordecai is constantly distracted, constantly unfocused, he paid attention to his friend, and it saved both of their lives. The theory argues that excellent is the show's definitive statement about what friendship means. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about listening. It's about remembering. It's about taking what matters to someone else and making it matter to you, even when it's a trucker hat that says, "I'm excellent." And this is one of those episodes I think about randomly at like 2 a.m. Not because of the plot, but because of what it says about how we show love. Because most of us don't fight demons for our friends. Most of us don't go to space. But all of us have the chance to listen, to remember what matters to someone we care about, and to show up when it counts. Let me move on to another episode that has generated some fascinating theories. Exit 9B, the Season 4 premiere that aired on October 1st, 2012. This is the half-hour special where Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr. builds a highway exit on top of the park to avenge his father, and in the process, opens a portal that brings back every villain Mordecai and Rigby have ever defeated. The surface-level theory about Exit 9B is that it's a celebration of continuity. It's the show saying, hey, remember all those one-off villains from the past 2 seasons? They all matter. They're all part of a connected universe. And that's true. Exit 9B was a milestone for regular show because it proved that the show's episodic formula had been building towards something bigger. The villains weren't random. They were connected, and they could come back. But the deeper theory is about the concept of the past coming back to haunt you. Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr. is the son of a villain from an earlier episode. He's the literal child of Mordecai and Rigby's past mistakes. And his plan is to tear down the park, their present, and replace it with a highway, a symbol of transit and impermanence. He wants to destroy their home and replace it with a place people pass through without stopping. The theory argues that Exit 9B is about the fear that your past will catch up with you and destroy everything you've built. Every villain that comes through the portal is a consequence that Mordecai and Rigby thought they'd dealt with. They thought those problems were over, but problems don't just disappear. They accumulate. They compound. And eventually, they come back all at once, and you have to face all of them simultaneously. And the resolution, where the park crew rallies allies from across the series to fight back, is about building a network of support to face your past. You can't do it alone. You need friends. You need allies. You need the ducks and the guardians of eternal youth and death himself on your side. Because the past is big, and it's angry, and it's coming for you. And the only way to survive it is together. I think Exit 9B is underrated as a theory episode. People remember it as a fun special with lots of callbacks. And it is that, but it's also a really sophisticated meditation on accountability and community. And the fact that Mordecai and Rigby win by getting Benson to sign a document declaring the park a historical landmark, by literally protecting their home with bureaucracy, is both hilarious and thematically perfect. Sometimes the best way to fight the past is to make the present official, to commit, to say, this is where I am, this is what I've built, and it's staying. Now let's talk about the real Thomas. This is the Season 6 special that reveals Thomas, the seemingly boring goat intern, is actually a Russian spy named Nikolai. He was sent by the Russian government to infiltrate the park, and his mission was to literally fly the park to Russia as part of a plan to dismantle America piece by piece. I love this episode for so many reasons, but the theory about it is fascinating. The theory is that Thomas represents the fear of inauthenticity. He was a fake. His name was fake. His personality was fake. Everything about him was constructed to deceive the people who trusted him, and the show waited until Thomas had been a minor character for multiple seasons before revealing this, which means the audience was fooled too. We thought Thomas was boring. We thought he was nobody. And it turns out, he was the most dangerous person in the park. The theory extends to a broader reading of regular show as a show about masks. Every character wears a mask of some kind. Benson masks his sadness with anger. Muscle Man masks his insecurity with jokes. Mordecai masks his indecision with coolness. And Thomas masks his entire identity with a false one. The difference is that Thomas is the only character whose mask is literal, whose deception is total. And the show's decision to reveal and destroy that mask, to strip Thomas of his fake identity and force him to choose between his mission and his friends, is a statement about the value of authenticity. Thomas chooses his friends. He double-crosses the Russian government. He sacrifices his entire constructed identity to protect the people he's come to genuinely care about. And then he disappears. He goes into hiding. He ends up in Montreal, running a video store that only rents spy movies, which is honestly one of the best throwaway gags in the entire series. But the theory points out that Thomas's choice is the show's ideal in miniature. He had a mask. He took it off. He chose to be real. And it cost him everything. That's what growing up requires. It requires dropping the persona and being yourself, even when being yourself means losing the safety of the mask. I want to keep going with episode theories because I think there's a really rich vein here that doesn't get mined enough. Let's talk about Mordecai and the Rigbys, the season 1 finale that aired on November 22nd, 2010. In this episode, Mordecai lies to Margaret about being in a band, and then he and Rigby have to actually perform at an open mic night at the coffee shop. They discover that their future selves have traveled back in time to help them, and they perform a song called Party Tonight. But halfway through the performance, Mordecai drops his guitar pick and realizes the music is still playing. They've been lip-syncing the entire time. Their future selves set up a CD and let them fake it. The theory about this episode is that it's a meditation on imposter syndrome. Mordecai wants to impress Margaret. He lies about his abilities. And then when he gets the chance to prove himself, he discovers that even his success is fake. He's not really performing. He's pretending. And the horror of that realization, the moment when the music keeps playing after he stops, is the show's most visceral representation of the fear that you're not actually good enough, that everything you've achieved is an illusion, that at any moment, someone is going to notice that the music isn't coming from you. And here's the part of that theory that gets me. The song, Party Tonight, was originally sung by storyboarder Sean Sealis, and then re-recorded by J.G. Quintel himself for the episode. So, even on a meta level, the song's authorship is blurred. Whose song is it? Who's really performing? The line between creator and character, between authentic and inauthentic, is deliberately fuzzy. The future selves add another layer. They came back in time to help, which is sweet, but they helped by enabling a lie. They gave Mordecai and Rigby the tools to fake it, not the tools to be real. And the theory asks, is that what growing up is? Finding more sophisticated ways to pretend? Or is the episode suggesting that eventually you have to stop relying on future versions of yourself to bail you out and start actually learning to play? I think the answer is the second one, and I think the show agrees. Because Mordecai doesn't learn to play in this episode. He doesn't become a musician. He goes back to being a park groundskeeper who can't talk to the girl he likes. The lesson isn't learned. The growth hasn't happened yet. And that's okay, because it's season 1. He's got 7 more seasons to figure it out, and he will. Eventually. Slowly. The way real people do. Alright, let's get into what I think is one of the most fascinating areas of regular show theory. And it's one that requires us to think about the show on a structural level rather than a character level. The theory of escalation. Every regular show episode follows the same basic formula. Start with something mundane. Escalate it into something supernatural. Resolve it with a combination of teamwork and desperation. Reset. But the theory I want to explore isn't about what the escalation means. We've covered that. It's about what the escalation does to the characters over time. Because here's the thing that I don't think enough people talk about. By season 8, Mordecai and Rigby have been through more traumatic experiences than most action movie heroes. They've died. They've been to other dimensions. They've fought gods. They've watched friends get erased from existence. They've been to space. They've seen the fabric of reality tear apart. And through all of this, they remain essentially the same 2 guys. They're still slackers. They're still friends. They're still arguing about who has to do the dishes. And the theory asks, how is that possible? How can 2 people go through over 260 episodes of escalating trauma and come out the other side as recognizable versions of themselves? And the answer, according to the theory, is that they can't. The theory suggests that the characters of regular show are deeply, fundamentally affected by the things that happen to them. But the show's episodic format doesn't allow that damage to surface in obvious ways. Instead, it manifests in subtle changes. Mordecai becomes more cautious over the seasons. Rigby becomes more serious. Benson becomes less angry and more tired. The escalations don't leave visible scars, but they leave invisible ones. And this is where the theory connects to the show's treatment of PTSD, which is a whole other rabbit hole, but I want to touch on it briefly. The theory argues that if you treated the events of regular show as real, if you took a realistic psychological approach to what these characters experience, they would all be suffering from severe post-traumatic stress. The frequency and intensity of the supernatural events they encounter goes far beyond what any person could process. And the show's reset structure, where things go back to normal after each episode, isn't healing. It's denial. The characters don't process what happened. They don't talk about it. They just move on. And that unprocessed trauma builds up, episode after episode, season after season, until the show's later seasons, when the emotional weight becomes too heavy to ignore, and the characters are forced to actually change. I'm not saying this is what Quintel intended. I'm not saying regular show is a show about PTSD, but I think the reading is there, if you want it, and I think it adds something to the experience. Because it explains why the later seasons feel different from the earlier ones. The lightness is gone. The easiness is gone. And that's not just because the show matured. It's because the characters have been through too much to keep pretending everything is fine. This feels like a good moment to talk about something that I've been wanting to bring up for a while. And it has to do with the way regular show uses space as a storytelling tool. In season 7, the park is launched into space. The dome seals. The ground breaks away, and the entire park floats up into the sky. This happens in Rigby's graduation day special, and it's one of the most dramatic moments in the entire series. Everything changes. The characters are no longer on Earth. They're no longer in their familiar world. They're in space, surrounded by aliens and cosmic threats and the vast emptiness of the universe. And the theory about this transition is that space represents the unknown future. For 7 seasons, the park was the characters' safe space. It was predictable. It was contained. Yes, crazy things happened, but they happened within a familiar framework. The park was home. And then it wasn't. The characters were ripped out of their comfort zone and thrown into something completely unfamiliar. And that's what growing up feels like. That's what leaving home feels like. One day you're in the park you've always known, and the next day you're floating in space, and nothing makes sense, and you have to figure out how to survive in a world that's nothing like the one you left. The theory also notes that the transition to space coincides with Rigby's graduation. He's just finished high school. He's earned his diploma. He's taken the first step toward adulthood, and immediately, everything changes. The safety net disappears. The familiar world is gone. The future is vast and terrifying and beautiful, and he has no idea what's coming. That timing can't be accidental. Quintel placed Rigby's graduation and the park's launch into space in the same episode because they're the same event. One is literal and one is metaphorical, but they mean the same thing. You're done with the old world. Welcome to the new one. Good luck. And I think the way Season 8 handles the space setting supports this reading. The characters in space are disoriented. They're homesick. They miss Earth. But they also discover new things, meet new people, face new challenges. They grow in ways they never could have grown in the park. The park was stasis. Space is growth. And the show's final season is about the characters learning to thrive in unfamiliar territory, which is the most grown-up thing any of them do. And there's a really specific detail about Season 8 that fans have picked up on. And I want to spend a moment with it because I think it's one of those small things that reveals something huge about the show's intentions. In Space Escape, the 15th episode of Season 8, which aired on October 12th, 2016, Anti-Pops attacks the space tree. The park dome barely escapes. And during the escape, a character named Chance Sure-Shot sacrifices himself to destroy a laser that would have obliterated the dome. He dies. And the show doesn't undo it. There's no time travel, no magical reset, no wrestling, death for his soul. Chance Sure-Shot dies and stays dead. The theory about this moment is that it's the show preparing the audience for Pops' sacrifice. Regular show had spent years establishing that death could be undone. Rigby died and came back. Characters were erased and restored. Death himself was a friendly neighbor who could be negotiated with. And then, in Season 8, the show starts taking that safety net away. Chance Sure-Shot dies and doesn't come back. The message is clear. We're not playing by the old rules anymore. In this final season, death is real. And if you're not prepared for that, what's coming is going to hit you even harder. I actually love this as a narrative strategy. It's like the show is slowly turning up the heat. For 7 seasons, it kept the stakes manageable. Death was present, but reversible. And then, in the final stretch, the show says, okay, we've been gentle with you. We're not going to be gentle anymore. And that escalation of emotional stakes, that gradual shift from safety to genuine danger, is what makes Pops' death feel earned rather than cheap. You've been warned. You've seen characters die without rescue. And now, the biggest death of all arrives. And you can't look away. Because you know, this time, it's going to stick. The space tree itself is worth theorizing about. It's this massive space station where alien races gather, with its own bureaucracy and its own politics. And the theory is that the space tree is the adult version of the park. Think about it. The park is a small, contained space where a handful of characters deal with their problems in relative isolation. The space tree is a massive, complex space where hundreds of species deal with interconnected problems that affect everyone. The park is childhood. The space tree is adulthood. And the characters transition from one to the other, from the small contained world to the vast complex one, is the transition from a child's understanding of life to an adult's. And there's a specific character dynamic in Season 8 that the theory highlights. When the park crew arrives at the space tree, they're nobodies. They're the new kids. They don't understand the politics, the culture, the rules. They're exactly what they were in Season 1, lost and out of their depth, but in a vastly larger context. And the way they navigate this new environment, by relying on the skills they developed at the park, the teamwork, the loyalty, the willingness to step up when things get hard, is the show's way of saying that the lessons of youth don't become useless in adulthood. They become more important. The things Mordecai and Rigby learned at the park, the things they learned by setting up chairs and fighting demons and having their hearts broken, those things are what saved them in space. Growing up doesn't erase your past. It builds on it. I want to take a slight detour here because I keep thinking about something that might seem tangential, but which I think is actually central to what regular show is about. And it's the show's relationship with loneliness. Because here's the thing about these characters. Despite living together, despite working together, despite being in each other's lives every single day, they're all profoundly lonely. Mordecai is lonely because he can't connect with the people he loves. Rigby is lonely because he feels fundamentally inadequate. Benson is lonely because nobody understands the pressure he's under. Skips is lonely because he's the only immortal person in a mortal world. Pops is lonely because his innocence isolates him from anyone who isn't equally pure. Muscle Man is lonely because his real self is hidden behind a performance. High Five Ghost is lonely because he's literally invisible to most people. The theory is that loneliness is the show's bedrock emotion. Beneath the comedy, beneath the supernatural chaos, beneath the friendship and the teamwork, every character in regular show is dealing with a fundamental disconnection from the people around them. And the show's project, across all 8 seasons, is about these lonely people slowly, painfully learning to bridge the gaps between them. And I think this reading explains why the show's quietest moments are often its most powerful. When Mordecai and Rigby sit together in silence, not talking, not doing anything, just existing in the same space, that silence carries enormous weight. Because for two people who are as lonely as they are, just being present with someone who doesn't require you to perform, who doesn't need you to be funny or clever or productive, who just lets you be, that's the most profound gift you can give another person. The show understands this. It understands that connection isn't about conversation or activity or shared interests. It's about presence. It's about showing up and staying. And the characters who figure this out, the characters who learn to simply be present for each other, those are the characters who find what they're looking for. Rigby and Eileen, Muscle Man and Starla, Mordecai and Rigby themselves. Their connections work not because they're perfect communicators or ideal partners. They work because they show up, they stay, they're present. And in a world of supernatural chaos and existential threat, presence is the most radical act of love there is. I've been thinking about this show's relationship with loneliness a lot, honestly, and it connects to something I want to say about the format of this video. You're watching this late at night. You might be alone, you might be in bed, or on the couch, or in the dark. And this video, this long, rambling exploration of a cartoon from 2010, is keeping you company. That's what Velvo is. That's what fall asleep to means. It means we're here with you, in the dark, talking about something we care about. And if that makes your night a little less lonely, then we've done our job. Because that's what regular show did too. It kept people company. It was there, on Cartoon Network, at whatever time of night you were watching. And it made you feel less alone. Not because it told you that everything was going to be okay, but because it showed you characters who were going through the same thing you were going through, who were lonely and confused and scared, and still somehow finding reasons to laugh. And that shared experience, that recognition of your own feelings in a cartoon character, that's connection. That's the opposite of loneliness. And it costs nothing. It asks nothing. It just says, hey, I'm here too, and I know how you feel. Let me pivot to another theory that I find genuinely unsettling. It's the theory about Pops and innocence. And it goes beyond the Pops is a god revelation to ask a more philosophical question. What does it mean that the most powerful being in the universe is also the most innocent? Pops doesn't understand sarcasm. He doesn't understand cruelty. He doesn't understand deception. He takes everything at face value because he literally doesn't have the capacity for cynicism. And the show plays this for comedy in the early seasons. Pops is funny because he's naive. He's a grown man who acts like a child, and that gap between his age and his behavior is inherently comedic. But then, Season 8 reveals why Pops is like this. He's not naive because he's sheltered or unintelligent. He's naive because he is the embodiment of pure good. Cynicism and cruelty and deception are literally foreign to his nature. He can't be those things. It would be like asking water to be dry. His innocence isn't a personality trait. It's his fundamental nature. And the theory asks, is that a blessing or a curse? Because think about what Pops' innocence means in practice. He can't protect himself. He can't recognize when people are taking advantage of him. He can't navigate the complexities of a world that runs on compromise and self-interest. He needs people around him, Benson, Mordecai, Rigby, Skips, to protect him from a world that would devour someone that pure. The theory suggests that Pops is the show's commentary on the relationship between innocence and power. Pops is infinitely powerful. He could do anything, but his innocence prevents him from using that power in any way that isn't pure. He can't fight back against evil because fighting back would require him to become less good. And that's why the final battle is resolved by a hug, not a punch. Pops can't punch. Punching is what the other version of him does. Pops can only love. And the tragedy is that loving his enemy costs him his life. I think this is one of the deepest things regular show ever did. And I'm not sure the show gets enough recognition for it. The idea that goodness is both the most powerful and the most vulnerable thing in existence. That the ability to love without reservation is both a strength and a fatal weakness. That's a genuinely philosophical idea. And it comes from a show where a guy once got possessed by a hot dog spirit. And here's the connection to the broader theory landscape. If Pops represents pure innocence, and his sacrifice represents the death of innocence, then the show's finale is about the cost of growing up. You can't stay innocent forever. The world won't let you. And the people who protect innocence, the Bensons and the Mordecays and the Rigbys, they're not just protecting a person. They're protecting an idea. The idea that the world can be good. The idea that kindness matters. The idea that a hug is more powerful than a fist. And when Pops dies, when that innocence is sacrificed to save everyone else, the show is saying something that is both devastating and true. Growing up means losing something. You can't become an adult without the death of the child you were. And the child you were was the best part of you. And you know, I keep circling back to a detail that I think amplifies this reading in a way that doesn't get discussed enough. Pops' planet is called Lollyland. It's a pink planet. It's the birthplace of both Pops and Auntie Pops. And the name itself, Lollyland, is significant. It's a childish name, a candy name, a name that sounds like it was invented by a 5-year-old. And that's the point. The place where pure good originates is a place with a child's name. Because pure good is childlike. It's innocent. It's sweet. And it exists on a planet that sounds like a bedtime story because it belongs to the part of us that still believes in bedtime stories. There's a fan theory that takes Lollyland and runs with it in a direction I find fascinating. The theory is that Lollyland isn't just Pop's birthplace. It's the source of all innocence in the regular show universe. Every character's capacity for kindness, every moment of genuine warmth, every act of selfless love, all of it originates from Lollyland. Pops carried it with him when Mr. Maillard brought him to Earth. And his presence at the park, his radiating goodness, is what kept the park's characters capable of compassion, even when the world was trying to harden them. And when Pops dies, when the source of that innocence is removed from the universe, the theory asks, does the innocence die too? Or has Pops distributed enough of it over the course of the series that it survives without him? The epilogue suggests the latter. The characters are still kind in the epilogue. They still care about each other. They still show up for reunions and raise families and remember their friends with love. The innocence survived. Pops' sacrifice preserved it. He didn't just save the universe from anti-Pops. He saved the capacity for goodness itself. And that goodness lives on in every character he touched, including us, the audience, who spent 8 years in his company. I don't know if J.G. Quintel thought about Lollyland in these terms, but I think the name speaks for itself. A candy-colored planet that produces pure goodness and pure evil in equal measure. A place where the fundamental forces of the universe are born as twin brothers. That's mythology. Real mythology. The kind that speaks to something deep in the human experience. And the fact that Quintel built this mythology inside a show that also features competitive eating challenges and haunted VHS tapes is, I think, one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of animated television. But I want to make sure we also talk about the counterpart to all this cosmic goodness, because Auntie Pops is a character who deserves his own theoretical examination. Auntie Pops, born Malum Kranis, is the embodiment of pure evil. And the theory about him is more complex than you might expect. Because here's the thing about Auntie Pops. He's not evil by choice. He was created evil. He was born as the counterbalance to Pops' goodness. He exists because the universe needed someone to oppose Pops. He didn't wake up one day and decide to be a villain. He was made that way. And the theory asks, is Auntie Pops really the villain, or is he a victim? Is he evil, or is he just doing what he was made to do? And this connects to a broader philosophical question that I think the show raises without answering. Are people responsible for the things they were born to be? If you were made a certain way, if your nature was determined before you had any say in the matter, can you be blamed for acting according to that nature? Auntie Pops destroys things because destroying things is his purpose. Pops creates things because creating things is his purpose. Neither of them chose their roles. Neither of them seem to be what they are. They're both prisoners of their own natures. And the moment in the finale, when Pops hugs Auntie Pops, when the embodiment of good embraces the embodiment of evil, that's not just a tactical move. It's an act of compassion towards someone who never received compassion before. It's Pops saying, I know you didn't choose this. I know you're not evil by choice, and I love you anyway. And Auntie Pops' brief moment of hesitation, that split second where he considers not destroying everything, that's the most human moment in the entire finale. Because it shows that even someone made for destruction has the capacity for something else. Even Auntie Pops, for just a second, wanted to be something other than what he was born to be. I think about that moment a lot, more than I probably should for a cartoon about a gumball machine and his friends. But I think it's the thesis of the entire show compressed into a single beat. You are more than what you were made to be. You can choose differently. It might only last a second. It might not be enough to change anything. But that second of choice, that flicker of free will against the weight of your nature, that's what makes you human. Or whatever regular show's characters are. The point stands. Okay, I need to catch my breath here because we've been going deep and I want to shift into some lighter territory for a bit. Let's talk about some of the more fun, less philosophical theories that the regular show community has produced. Because not every theory has to be about death and the meaning of existence. Sometimes a theory is just clever, and that's enough. The video game theory. This one is simple and elegant. The theory is that every episode of regular show is structured like a video game level. You have a starting objective, the mundane task. You have enemies that appear and escalate in difficulty. You have power-ups and allies that arrive to help. You have a boss fight at the climax. And you have a reward at the end. Usually, the restoration of normalcy. The theory argues that this isn't just structural similarity. It's intentional design. J.G. Quintel was inspired by video games. He's mentioned playing Street Fighter, Shadowrun, and Toe Jam and Earl as a child. And regular show's episodic formula mirrors the structure of a video game level so closely that it can't be coincidence. The evidence goes deeper when you look at specific episodes. In The Power, the magical keyboard functions like a power-up item. In episodes featuring the baby ducks, the fusion mechanic mirrors the combining robots of mecha video games. In Exit 9B, the final battle against returning villains plays out exactly like a boss rush in a video game, where you fight all the previous bosses in sequence before the final confrontation. And there's an interesting extension of this theory that connects it to the 80s aesthetic. The video games of the 80s were all about levels and lives and continues. You played until you died, and then you started over. And regular show's episodic reset structure mirrors that exact rhythm. Every episode, the characters die in some metaphorical sense. They lose, they fail, things go wrong, and then they get a continue. They come back the next episode and try again. The show is a video game with infinite continues. I actually like this theory a lot because it doesn't try to be profound. It's just an observation about structure that happens to be really well supported. And I think it explains why regular show is so rewatchable. Like a good video game level, each episode has a clear beginning, middle, and end, with just enough variation in the mechanics to keep it interesting. You know the formula, but the execution surprises you every time. Here's another fun one, the temperature theory. This is really obscure, and I love it. The theory is that the emotional temperature of a regular show episode can be predicted by the time of day it's set in. Episodes set during the day tend to be lighter, more comedic, more focused on workplace hijinks. Episodes set at night tend to be darker, more emotional, more willing to go to difficult places. And episodes that transition from day to night within a single episode tend to have a tonal shift at the transition point, moving from comedy to drama as the sun goes down. I went through and checked this against a bunch of episodes, and it's surprisingly consistent. Excellent starts during the day with a fun eating challenge and ends with Mordecai in a dark, torch-lit cavern making a life or death choice. Skip's story is set across multiple time periods, but its most emotional scenes take place at night, at the prom where Mona dies. Stake Me Amadeus takes place during an evening dinner and is one of the most emotionally devastating episodes of the series. The nighttime setting primes you for darkness. The show knows this and uses it. Now, is this a deliberate choice by the writing staff? Maybe, maybe not. But I think at minimum, it's an unconscious pattern that reflects how the show's creators think about emotional tone. Night is vulnerable. Night is honest. Night is when the masks come off. And that's why Velvo exists, right? This is a late night channel. You're watching this at night. And maybe there's something about the darkness that makes these theories hit harder, that makes the show's emotional depth feel more real. Because at night, you're vulnerable too. You're honest too. And a show about growing up hits different when the sun is down. And while we're on the subject of time of day and emotional register, let me bring up another theory that I think operates at a similarly subtle level. It's the theory about silence. Regular show is, at its core, a loud show. There's yelling, there's music, there's explosions, there's Benson screaming, there's Muscle Man hollering. The default mode of the show is noise. And the theory argues that when the show goes silent, when it pulls the noise away and lets a moment exist without sound, that silence is the show's most powerful tool. Think about the moments of silence in regular show. After Mordecai puts the hat on Comatose Rigby in Excellent. After Skips tells the story of Mona. After Margaret walks out of the restaurant in Stake Me Amadeus. After Pops pushes himself and Auntie Pops into the sun. These are the show's most devastating moments. And they all happen in silence. Or near silence. The noise drops away, the world stops, and you're left alone with the image, with the emotion, with the weight of what just happened. The theory argues that regular show uses silence the way a musician uses rests. The silent beats aren't gaps. They're notes. They're as deliberately placed as any joke or any explosion. And the contrast between the show's usual loudness and its occasional silence is what makes those silent moments hit so hard. If the show were always quiet, the silence wouldn't register. But because it's usually screaming and exploding, the moments when it stops are devastating. The absence of noise becomes its own kind of noise. And I think this connects to the show's treatment of male emotional expression that we talked about earlier. Men in our culture are socialized to be loud, to fill space with their presence, to perform confidence and competence at all times. And regular show's male characters do all of those things. But their most honest moments, their most genuine expressions of feeling, happen in silence. When they stop talking, when they stop performing, when they just stand there and let the moment be what it is. That's a really powerful statement about what emotional honesty looks like for men. It's not a speech. It's not a declaration. It's the moment when the noise stops and the mask falls, and you're just a person standing in front of another person, not saying anything, because the words haven't been invented for what you're feeling. Regular show understands that some feelings are too big for language, and its willingness to let those feelings exist without trying to articulate them is one of the bravest things it does. I also want to mention a micro theory about the show's use of flashbacks, because I think it connects to the temporal theories we discussed earlier. Regular show uses flashbacks sparingly, but when it does use them, they're always revelatory. Skip's story is essentially one long flashback. Trucker Hall of Fame contains flashbacks to Muscle Man's childhood. The real Thomas flashes back to Nikolai's origins. And in every case, the flashback reveals something that changes how you understand the present. The theory is that regular show's flashbacks function as archaeological digs. The show is excavating its characters' pasts, layer by layer, revealing the buried experiences that shaped who they are in the present. And each revelation, each flashback, adds a new stratum to the character's depth. Skips isn't just the strong guy. He's a man who lost the love of his life. Muscle Man isn't just the loud guy. He's a son mourning a father who lied. Thomas isn't just the intern. He's a spy with a tragic origin. The present is always being rewritten by the past, and the show's selective use of flashbacks ensures that each revelation feels earned, feels significant, feels like a door opening onto something you didn't know was there. And I think there's something really smart about how the show times these revelations. The biggest character flashbacks tend to come in the middle seasons, not the beginning and not the end. Season 1 and 2 establish the characters as they appear. Seasons 3 through 6 excavate their pasts. And seasons 7 and 8 deal with the consequences of everything that's been revealed. That structure, surface then depth, then consequence, mirrors the way we actually get to know people. You meet someone and they're one thing. Then you learn about their past, and they become something more complex. And then you have to figure out how to relate to this more complex version of them. Regular Show does that with every member of its cast, and the fact that it does it over 8 seasons means the process feels natural, unhurried, real. Let me get back into some heavier theory territory now, because there are still some major ones we haven't covered. And I want to talk about what I consider to be one of the most important and underappreciated theories about Regular Show. The theory that Regular Show is a show about work, not about working, in the characters have jobs sense, about work as a concept, about what it means to spend your life doing something, about the value of labor, about the difference between having a job and having a purpose. Think about the show's setup. Mordecai and Rigby are groundskeepers. They're the lowest rung of the park's hierarchy. Their job is to mow lawns, set up chairs, rake leaves, clean up. It's manual labor. It's repetitive. It's not glamorous, and they hate it. Every episode starts with them trying to avoid doing their work. The inciting incident of almost every Regular Show plot is Mordecai and Rigby not wanting to do what they're supposed to do. And the theory argues that the show is systematically exploring what happens when you don't value your work. The supernatural escalation isn't just a metaphor for consequences. It's a metaphor for what happens when you treat your obligations as meaningless. When you don't take your job seriously, the show says, the universe punishes you by making your job impossibly, supernaturally hard. The easy task becomes the nightmare task. The thing you could have done in 5 minutes becomes a crisis that threatens reality itself. And here's the other side of that coin. When the characters do take their work seriously, when they commit to a task and follow through, things tend to work out. The episodes where Mordecai and Rigby actually try, where they actually put in effort, tend to have smoother resolutions and less catastrophic escalation. It's as if the universe rewards effort and punishes laziness, not in a moralistic, preachy way, in a structural, mechanical way. The show's formula literally works differently when the characters care about what they're doing. The theory extends to Benson, who is the character most defined by his relationship to work. Benson takes his job seriously. He's the only one who does. And his tragedy, as we discussed earlier, is that no one around him shares that commitment. He's a man who values work in a world that doesn't value it, and the resulting loneliness and frustration define his entire character. And then there's Skips, who represents the other extreme. Skips has been working forever, literally forever. He's been maintaining things, fixing things, fighting things for centuries, and his immortality means he'll never retire. He'll never stop working. He's the ultimate worker. And the theory suggests that his weariness, his quiet sadness, comes from the realization that work without end is its own form of prison. I think this reading of the show is really important because it adds a dimension that the more popular theories tend to overlook. Regular Show isn't just about growing up in an abstract sense. It's about growing up in the specific, material sense of learning to work. Learning that your labor has value. Learning that the mundane tasks you'd rather avoid are actually the foundation of a meaningful life. And that's a message that's incredibly relevant for the show's audience, which is largely young people in their teens and 20s who are trying to figure out what their relationship to work is going to be. And here's where the theory gets really smart. The show doesn't glorify work. It doesn't say, shut up and do your job. Benson is not the hero for being a workaholic. The show's ideal isn't mindless obedience to authority. The show's ideal is engaged, purposeful effort. The difference between Mordecai and Rigby in Season 1, when they slack off because they don't care, and Mordecai and Rigby in Season 8, when they step up because they choose to, is the difference between working because you have to and working because it matters. And that transition, from obligation to purpose, is one of the most important things any person can experience. Okay, I want to get into the rabbit hole of regular show's connection to its CalArts roots, because there are theories here that I find genuinely fascinating and that connect to the bigger picture of what the show is about. We've talked about 2 in the AM/PM and its connection to the acid trip theory. But there's another CalArts short that's equally important to regular show's DNA, and it doesn't get nearly as much attention. It's called The Naive Man from Lollyland. The Naive Man from Lollyland was made by J.G. Quintel in 2005, a year before 2 in the AM/PM. It was produced entirely during Quintel's time at CalArts and took approximately 8 months to complete. The short features the first design for Pops, a naive, lollipop-headed character who is innocent to the point of vulnerability. The short was entered in the 2005 Nicktoons Film Festival, where Quintel won both the Producer's Choice and the Student Animator Awards. And here's the connection that the theory draws out. If 2 in the AM/PM gave regular show its style, its visual DNA, its escalation formula, then The Naive Man from Lollyland gave it its heart. Pops is the emotional center of regular show. Not Mordecai, not Rigby, not Benson. Pops. He's the character whose journey spans the entire series, from innocent bystander to cosmic sacrifice. And he was the first regular show character Quintel ever created. Before Mordecai, before Benson, before any of the others, there was Pops. The theory suggests that Pops is Quintel's most personal character. He's the one that came first, the one that Quintel spent the most time developing during his student years. And the fact that Quintel gave Pops the show's most dramatic and emotionally devastating arc, the revelation of his cosmic nature and his sacrificial death, suggests that Pops is the character Quintel cared about the most, the one he was saving the biggest story for. And I think there's something to that, because when you look at how the show handles Pops, there's a tenderness there that you don't see with any other character. Mordecai and Rigby are funny. Benson is sympathetic. Skips is cool. But Pops is precious. The show protects him. It shields him from the worst of the show's cynicism. And when it finally puts him in harm's way, in the final season, the entire narrative shifts to protect him. Every other character rallies around Pops. The show itself rallies around Pops, because he's the one thing that can't be allowed to become cynical. He's the last innocent. The CalArts connection also extends to the show's collaborative nature. Quintel developed his shorts at CalArts alongside other students, including Sam Marin, who would become one of the show's most important voice actors, voicing Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man. The CalArts environment, where students would draw words from a hat and rush to create films in 48 hours, where collaboration and improvisation were the norm, directly influenced regular show's creative process. The show's writing has a loose, improvisational quality that feels like it emerged from exactly that kind of creative environment. It's not polished in the way that a Disney or Pixar production is polished. It's raw. It's energetic. It's the work of people who are making things up as they go, and trusting that the energy will carry them through. And I think that rawness is part of what makes regular show feel so authentic. You can feel the human hands behind it. You can feel the late nights, and the in-jokes, and the moments where someone said, "What if we did this?" And everyone else said, "Yeah, let's try it." That CalArts energy, that collaborative spirit, is baked into the show's DNA. And the theory is that this is why regular show resonates in a way that more technically accomplished shows sometimes don't, because it feels real. It feels made by humans, not by a machine. And in a world of increasingly polished, increasingly algorithmic content, that humanity is precious. And here's something else about the CalArts connection that I think deserves more attention. The fact that Quintel's student films were made under pressure, in 48-hour sprints, in competitive environments where the goal was speed and instinct rather than perfection. That creative DNA shaped regular show in ways that I think are underappreciated. Regular show episodes feel urgent. They feel like they were made by people who were excited about the idea and wanted to get it on screen before the excitement faded. There's an energy to the best regular show episodes that comes from that CalArts urgency. That sense that the creators were racing to capture something before it slipped away. And I think that urgency is part of why the show's 11-minute format works so well for it. 11 minutes is not a lot of time. You have to move fast. You have to establish your premise, escalate it, reach the climax, and resolve it in the time it takes to eat a sandwich. And regular show thrives under that constraint because constraint was built into its DNA. Quintel learned to create under pressure. He learned to trust his instincts and move forward. And that training shows in every episode. The show never wastes time. It never meanders. Every scene earns its place. And when the show does slow down, when it does let a moment breathe, those moments hit harder because they've been earned by the relentless pace of everything around them. There's a theory that the 48-hour CalArts films are actually the blueprint for the escalation formula itself. Think about what happens when you have 48 hours to make a film. You start with an idea. The idea is simple. And then you have to make it interesting, make it watchable, make it worth someone's time. So you escalate. You push the idea further than it was meant to go. You take the simple premise and stretch it and twist it until it becomes something unexpected. That's the creative process under pressure. And that's exactly what happens in every regular show episode. Simple premise, stretched and twisted under pressure until it becomes something nobody expected. The escalation formula isn't just a storytelling device. It's a creative process. It's how Quintel learned to make things. And he turned his own creative method into the structure of his show. I think that's a meta theory that deserves more discussion. The idea that regular show's formula is a reflection of its creator's process. That the show's DNA is literally encoded with the conditions under which Quintel learned to create. It means that when you watch regular show, you're not just watching a cartoon. You're watching a creative philosophy in action. The philosophy that says, start simple, trust your instincts, push harder than seems reasonable, and don't stop until you've reached something surprising. That's what Quintel did at CalArts. That's what he did on regular show. And that's what makes the show feel alive in a way that more calculated, more carefully planned shows sometimes don't. I need to take a second here and address something that I know some of you have been thinking about. We've been going through a lot of theories tonight, and some of them are better supported than others. Some of them are backed by production details and confirmed creator statements and clear textual evidence. And some of them are more speculative, more interpretive, more about what the show might mean rather than what it definitively says. And I want to be honest about where the line is. Because I think one of the problems with theory culture, on YouTube and elsewhere, is that theories can start to feel like facts if you repeat them enough times. And that's not fair to the show or to the people who made it. J.G. Quintel made regular show. He and his team wrote over 260 episodes over 8 seasons. They made specific creative choices for specific reasons. And while interpretation is valid, while reading meaning into art is one of the most human things you can do, we should be honest about what's interpretation and what's confirmed. So here's my disclaimer. The acid trip theory has textual support in 2 in the AM PM. But Quintel has never confirmed that the show is meant to be read as a drug hallucination. The purgatory theory is a structural reading that fits the show's mechanics, but was almost certainly not the intended framework. The timeline theory is an observation about the show's aesthetic that may or may not reflect deliberate creative choices. And the character theories, while rich and emotionally resonant, are interpretive readings that different viewers will experience differently. What is confirmed is this. Regular show ran for 8 seasons and over 260 episodes on Cartoon Network from September 6th, 2010 to January 16th, 2017. It was created by J.G. Quintel. It won a Primetime Emmy for Excellent in 2012. Pops was revealed to be a cosmic entity in Season 8. Skip's backstory was revealed in Skip's story. The show's finale featured Pop's sacrifice and a 25-year time skip. These are facts. Everything else is interpretation. And interpretation is beautiful and valuable and important, but it's not fact. Okay, disclaimer out of the way. Let's keep going, because there are still theories we haven't covered, and I want to make sure we get to all of them. The theory of the baby ducks. This one is really specific, but I think it's great. Throughout regular show, Mordecai and Rigby repeatedly encounter a group of baby ducks that they befriend and protect. Over the course of the series, the ducks become increasingly powerful, eventually gaining the ability to fuse with Mordecai and Rigby to form a giant mecha-like warrior. In Brilliant Century Duck Crisis Special, a Season 6 half-hour special, the ducks and a group of geese engage in a massive battle that parodies anime and tokusatsu, complete with a Neon Genesis Evangelion-inspired intro. The theory about the ducks is that they represent the things you nurture casually that end up becoming the most important parts of your life. Mordecai and Rigby didn't adopt the ducks on purpose. They found them. They took care of them because it was the right thing to do, not because they expected anything in return. And those ducks, those small acts of kindness, grew into something incredible. They grew into allies powerful enough to save the world. The theory argues that the ducks are the show's metaphor for how small, seemingly insignificant choices compound over time. You help someone because it's the right thing to do, and years later, that person helps you when you need it most. You nurture something small, and it grows into something bigger than you could have imagined. The ducks aren't just a recurring gag. They're the show's most optimistic statement about cause and effect. In a show where lazy choices lead to supernatural disasters, the ducks represent the opposite. Good choices, even small ones, lead to supernatural salvation. And I love that reading because it balances out the darkness of some of the other theories we've discussed. Regular show isn't just about consequences for bad behavior. It's also about rewards for good behavior. And the ducks are the proof. Let me talk about another theory that connects to the show's mythology in a way I find really compelling. It's the theory about the Guardians of Eternal Youth. The Guardians of Eternal Youth are a group of floating baby heads that grant Skips his immortality and show up periodically throughout the series to offer guidance, set challenges, or generally be weird. They live in a volcano. They watch over the balance of things. And the theory is that they know much more about the show's cosmic mythology than they let on. The theory argues that the Guardians are aware of the pops/anti-pops cycle. They know about the universal resets. They know about Lollyland and Mega Cranus and Malum Cranus. And the reason they granted Skips immortality isn't just so he can fight Clorgbane every 157 years. It's so that Skips can serve as a protector of whoever the current incarnation of Pops is. The Guardians are playing a long game that spans billions of years, and Skips is their agent. The evidence for this is circumstantial but interesting. The Guardians show up in the finale to fight alongside Pops. They've been watching over the park, where Pops lives, for the entire series. They granted immortality to someone who works at the park. That's a lot of interest in one specific location for beings who are supposed to be cosmic, unless the location is cosmically important, unless the park is where Mega Cranus is living. And this connects to the purgatory theory again, doesn't it? If the park is the location where a cosmic being is being hidden, then the supernatural events that constantly plague it aren't random. They're the result of Pops' presence warping reality around him. The escalations, the demons, the portals, all of it is a side effect of having an infinitely powerful being of pure good living in your neighborhood. The park isn't haunted. The park isn't cursed. The park is radiating cosmic energy from its most innocent resident, and that energy manifests as the chaos that defines the show. I actually want to dwell on this theory for a minute, because I think it's one of the most comprehensive readings of the show I've encountered. If Pops' cosmic nature is the source of the park's supernatural activity, then every theory we've discussed tonight can be reframed. The acid trip theory? The hallucinations are real. They're just caused by proximity to a cosmic entity rather than by drugs. The purgatory theory? The park is a liminal space because it's the home of a being who exists between worlds. The timeline theory? Time is unstable around Pops because Pops exists outside of normal time. Everything clicks. Everything connects. The show's central mystery, why does weird stuff happen at this park, has a single answer: Pops. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm aware that this is the kind of unified theory that can feel too neat. Real art is usually messier than a single theory can account for. But I think there's something satisfying about the idea that regular show, for all its apparent randomness, for all its LOL so random surface comedy, has a single, coherent explanation running beneath everything. It's not random. It was never random. It was Pops all along. And while we're in this cosmic headspace, I want to explore a theory that I've seen debated in smaller corners of the fandom, and it's one that I find absolutely wild. The recurring character theory. The idea that certain characters in regular show, characters who appear in multiple episodes across different seasons, are more important to the show's mythology than we realize. Take the baby ducks. We talked about them earlier in terms of what they represent thematically. The things you nurture that grow into something powerful. But the theory goes further. The baby ducks first appeared in Season 2 in A Bunch of Baby Ducks, which aired on June 6th, 2011. In that episode, Mordecai and Rigby find baby ducks in the park fountain while trying to clean it. They bond with the ducks. A buyer shows up wanting to purchase them, and the ducks fuse together into a giant humanoid duck warrior to protect Mordecai and Rigby. Now, the fusion mechanic. Think about what's actually happening here. 4 baby ducks merge their bodies into a single entity. That's not just a cool visual. That's a statement about unity, about how individual weakness becomes collective strength. And the theory notes that this fusion mechanic mirrors what happens with Pops and Anti-Pops. 2 beings merging, creating something bigger than either of them alone. The difference is that the ducks merge out of love, and Pops and Anti-Pops merge out of conflict. Same mechanism, opposite motivations, opposite outcomes. And every time the ducks return, they're stronger. They level up. They evolve. By the time we get to Brilliant Century Duck Crisis Special in Season 6, the ducks are piloting anime-style mecha robots. They've gone from helpless babies to cosmic warriors. And the theory argues that this escalation trajectory isn't just comedic. It's the show demonstrating, in miniature, the same growth arc that the main characters undergo. Start small, grow through experience. Eventually, become something nobody thought you could be. The geese are the dark mirror of the ducks. Where the ducks are loyal and protective, the geese are aggressive and self-interested. They're the anti-ducks. And the conflict between ducks and geese in Brilliant Century Duck Crisis Special is a microcosm of the Pops/Anti-Pops conflict. Good versus evil, nurture versus aggression, unity versus domination. The show keeps telling the same story at different scales, with different characters, in different genres, and every version of the story reinforces the same thesis. Love wins. Compassion wins. The thing you nurture with kindness will save you. The thing you control with force will destroy you. There's another recurring element that I want to bring up because it feeds into some of the darker theories about the show. The party. Regular show is obsessed with parties. Characters are constantly throwing parties, attending parties, trying to get into parties, being kicked out of parties. The word party appears in episode titles more than almost any other word. Party Pete, Party Repeat, Party Tonight, Benson's Party. The park crew's social calendar is basically one endless party. And the theory asks, why parties? Of all the social activities the show could focus on, why is it always parties? The theory's answer is that parties in regular show represent the illusion of connection. A party is a social event where everyone is together, but nobody is truly connected. You're in the same room as 100 people, surrounded by noise and music and energy, and you're still alone. The party is the anti-conversation. It's the opposite of the intimate, vulnerable, one-on-one moments that actually build relationships. And the theory argues that the character's obsession with parties is their way of avoiding real connection. They want to be around people without being close to people. They want the warmth of community without the risk of intimacy. And look at what happens when the parties go wrong. They always go wrong in regular show. Every party attracts a threat. Every celebration becomes a crisis. The theory reads this as the show's commentary on superficial socializing. When you pursue connection through parties, through noise and distraction, the universe punishes you, just like when you take shortcuts with your work. The supernatural consequence is proportional to the emotional avoidance. You avoid real connection, you get a demon at your party, because you earned it. And there's a flip side to this that I think completes the theory. The best parties in regular show, The ones that don't end in disaster are the ones that are small and genuine. Muscle Man's bachelor party, Rigby's graduation celebration, the reunion in the epilogue. These aren't blowouts. They're gatherings of people who actually know and love each other, and the show rewards them with normalcy. No demons, no portals, no escalation. Just people being together. Because when the connection is real, the universe doesn't need to punish you. The universe is satisfied. You're doing it right. I keep coming back to this idea, and I think it's one of the most consistent patterns in the entire show. Authenticity is rewarded. Inauthenticity is punished. Every supernatural escalation is a response to some form of dishonesty, whether it's cheating, or lying, or avoiding, or performing, or pretending to be something you're not. And every resolution requires a return to honesty. Admit the truth. Face the consequences. Be real, and the demons go away. That's regular show's moral compass. Simple, but sturdy, and deeply, deeply human. And it's a compass that points in the same direction no matter which theory you're using to navigate the show. Whether you're reading it as an acid trip, or purgatory, or a cosmic mythology, the needle always points toward honesty, toward being real, toward growing up. And I think that consistency, that unwavering moral clarity beneath all the chaos, is what makes these theories possible in the first place. The show has a center. The show has a truth. And every theory is just a different angle on that same unshakable truth. But the show also gives us moments of genuine connection that work. Moments that are small and quiet and personal. Mordecai and Rigby sitting on the steps at night, talking about nothing. Benson playing drums alone in the park. Skips working in silence. These moments don't attract supernatural threats because they're real, they're honest. And the universe, in regular show's logic, only punishes dishonesty. I think that's a really nuanced reading of the show's social dynamics. And it adds another dimension to the purgatory theory. If the park is a testing ground, then the tests aren't just about responsibility and work ethic. They're about emotional honesty. The characters who are honest about their feelings, who risk vulnerability, who connect genuinely with other people. Those are the characters who grow. Rigby learns to be honest with Eileen, and he gets the best relationship on the show. Muscle Man learns to be honest about his father's death, and he becomes one of the show's most complex characters. And the characters who stay dishonest, who keep performing, who keep hiding behind their masks, those characters stay stuck until they don't. Until the show forces them to be honest. And that's when the real growth happens. Let me also address a theory that might seem small, but that I think reveals something important about the show's world building. It's the theory about the park's geography. Fans have mapped the park across multiple episodes. They've tracked the location of the house, the fountain, the shed, the snack bar, the various roads and paths. And what they've found is that the park is surprisingly consistent. Unlike many animated shows, where backgrounds shift from episode to episode and spaces don't quite connect, regular show's park is a coherent, mappable space. You can actually walk from the house to the fountain to Skip's garage, and it all makes spatial sense. The theory is that this spatial consistency is part of the show's realism. Despite the supernatural elements, despite the impossibilities, the physical world of regular show is grounded. The park feels like a real place because it has real geography, and that grounding is what makes the supernatural elements work. When a portal opens in the park, you know where it opens. When a demon attacks, you know the escape routes. The park isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. And like all of the show's characters, it's been carefully, deliberately constructed. And the theory extends this to a meta-observation about the show's relationship with reality. Regular show is constantly balancing two impulses: the desire to be grounded and the desire to be fantastical. The park is grounded. The supernatural events are fantastical. And the show exists in the tension between these two impulses, which is exactly where its audience exists too. We all live in a world that is simultaneously mundane and extraordinary. We all wake up in real bedrooms and go to real jobs, and then encounter moments, emotions, experiences that feel utterly surreal. Regular show captures that experience. It says, yes, your life is ordinary, and also, it's not ordinary at all. Both things are true at the same time. There's one more recurring element theory I want to touch on, and it's about food. Regular show is a show about food. Characters are constantly eating the hot dogs, the coffee, the burritos, the wings, the omelet in Excellent, the steak in Steak Me Amadeus. Food is everywhere in this show, and the theory argues that food in regular show serves as a marker of emotional honesty. When characters share food, they're connecting. When Mordecai and Rigby eat together, which they do in almost every episode, they're affirming their friendship. When the park crew has a barbecue, they're being a family. Food is the show's language of communion. And when food goes wrong, when it's poisoned or cursed or part of a challenge, the theory reads that as the corruption of connection. Someone is trying to turn a moment of togetherness into a weapon. And the characters have to fight to reclaim the meal, to restore the purity of the connection that food represents. I think about the omelet in Excellent in this context. Rigby is allergic to eggs. He can't eat the omelet, and yet he tries anyway, because the challenge, the shared experience of doing something stupid with your friend, matters more to him than his own safety. Food is the arena, but the real battle is about proving that you'll show up for your friend, even when showing up is dangerous. And Mordecai wins the challenge, not by being a better eater, but by being a better listener, by remembering what Rigby told him about the hat. The food is incidental, the friendship is everything. And Steak Me Amadeus, the season 4 finale. Mordecai takes Margaret to a steak restaurant to confess his feelings. The setting is a meal, a shared meal, a communion. And when Margaret rejects him, not because she doesn't care, but because she has to leave for college, the meal is ruined. The food goes uneaten, the connection is severed, and Mordecai is left sitting at a table with an empty chair across from him. That image, a man alone at a table set for two, with untouched food growing cold, is one of the most quietly devastating images in the entire show. And it only works because the show has spent years establishing food as the language of togetherness. When the food is abandoned, the togetherness is abandoned, and you feel it. Let me shift gears one more time and talk about something that I think is going to be increasingly relevant as time goes on. The legacy theories. These are theories not about what regular show means, but about what it will mean in the future. The show ended in 2017. That's almost a decade ago now. And in that time, regular show has gone from a contemporary show to a nostalgic one. Kids who watched it when it premiered are in their 20s now. They're the age that Mordecai and Rigby were. They're doing the same things that Mordecai and Rigby did, trying to figure out work, trying to figure out relationships, trying to figure out what it means to grow up. And the theory is that regular show is going to become more important over time, not less, because its themes aren't tied to a specific moment. They're universal. Everyone goes through what Mordecai and Rigby go through. Everyone has a Benson. Everyone has a Skips. Everyone has a park they need to leave. And the theory notes that Quintel has been working on a new project. The regular show community is watching closely, waiting to see what the creator does next. And there have been reports of a regular show revival or continuation. And the theory about what that means for the show's legacy is interesting. If regular show comes back, does it change the theories? Does it validate some and invalidate others? Does the epilogue's time skip get overwritten? Or does a revival exist alongside the original, as a different thing, a continuation rather than a replacement? I don't have answers to those questions yet. Nobody does. But I think the fact that people are asking them, that fans are still this invested in a show that ended almost a decade ago, tells you something about how deep regular show's hooks go. This isn't a show people casually liked and moved on from. This is a show that changed people, that helped people understand things about themselves that they couldn't articulate before. And that kind of show doesn't just go away. There's also the cultural legacy theory, which argues that regular show's influence on subsequent animation is understudied and underappreciated. The show pioneered a specific tone, a combination of surreal comedy and genuine emotional depth that has become the standard for animated shows in the years since. Shows like Hilda, Craig of the Creek, and The Amazing World of Gumball all share DNA with regular show. They all do the thing that regular show proved was possible. They take kids' animation seriously without making it inaccessible. And the theory argues that regular show's greatest contribution to animation isn't any specific episode, or character, or storyline. It's the proof that a show can be silly and sincere at the same time. That you can have a character who is literally a gumball machine and still make the audience cry for him. That you can start an episode with a fart joke and end it with a meditation on mortality. Regular shows said, you can do both, and animation has never been the same since. I want to get into some theories about specific recurring elements that I think reveal a lot about the show's deeper structure. Let's talk about the phone. Cell phones appear in regular show starting around season 3 or 4, and their presence becomes increasingly prominent as the series goes on. And the theory is that the introduction of cell phones into the show's world represents a deliberate narrative choice about connectivity and isolation. In the early seasons, Mordecai and Rigby are connected to each other and disconnected from everyone else. The park is their world. Margaret is across the street at the coffee shop. Their families are somewhere else. They exist in a bubble, and that bubble is part of what makes the early seasons feel so specific. It's two guys in a closed world, dealing with whatever the world throws at them. But when cell phones arrive, the bubble pops. Suddenly, Mordecai can text Margaret. Rigby can call Dawn. The characters are connected to a wider world, and that connectivity changes the show's dynamics. Relationships that used to require physical proximity now happen at a distance. Misunderstandings that could have been resolved in person are now compounded by texts and calls and voicemails. And the theory argues that this isn't accidental. The show is tracking the real-world impact of technology on relationships. As cell phones become more prominent, the characters' interpersonal problems become more complex. The love triangle between Mordecai, Margaret, and CJ is partly enabled by cell phone communication, by the ability to be in contact with multiple people simultaneously without any of them knowing. Technology, the theory says, makes the characters' lives easier in practical terms and harder in emotional terms, which is exactly what happened to all of us. Here's a really specific theory that I want to bring up because I think it shows how deep the regular show rabbit hole goes. It's about the number 23. Fans have noticed that the number 23 appears in regular show with suspicious frequency. Room numbers, addresses, dates, prices, seemingly random numbers that turn out to be 23 more often than chance would suggest. And the theory is that this is a deliberate Easter egg by the production team, a nod to the 23 enigma, the belief that the number 23 is connected to a significant portion of incidents and events. Now, is this a real pattern, or is it pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns where there are none? Honestly, I'm not sure. I've looked at some of the examples fans have compiled, and some of them are compelling, and some of them feel like stretches. But what I find interesting about this theory isn't whether it's true. It's what it says about the regular show fandom. These are people who are watching this show frame by frame, background detail by background detail, looking for hidden messages. That level of engagement doesn't happen with a show that's just pretty good. It happens with shows that reward close attention. And regular show does reward close attention, even if the number 23 turns out to be coincidence. And let me tell you, as someone who has spent an unreasonable amount of time looking at regular show backgrounds, the level of detail in this show's art is staggering. Every room is filled with specific objects. Every background has hidden references. The park itself is a fully realized location with consistent geography and consistent landmarks. This isn't a show where backgrounds are afterthoughts. The backgrounds are part of the storytelling, and the theories that emerge from close readings of those backgrounds, the hidden posters, the recurring objects, the subtle changes between seasons, they add up to a picture of a show that was made with extraordinary care. I want to talk about one more character theory before we start winding toward the close, and it's one that I think is both the saddest and the most hopeful. It's the theory about Eileen. Eileen is Rigby's eventual wife. She works at the coffee shop with Margaret. She's quiet, she's smart, she wears glasses, and for most of the series, she has a crush on Rigby that he doesn't reciprocate. She's the quintessential wallflower, the character who's always in the room but never at the center of attention. And the theory about Eileen is that she's the show's representation of quiet strength. In a show full of loud characters, explosive conflicts, and supernatural crises, Eileen is the calm center. She doesn't escalate. She doesn't panic. She doesn't create drama. She just is. She's present. She's capable. and she's patient. And the theory argues that Eileen's patience is the key to her relationship with Rigby. She sees who Rigby really is before anyone else does, including Rigby himself. She sees past his insecurity, past his bravado, past his "my mom" jokes, which are Muscle Man's thing, not Rigby's. But the theory points out that Rigby has his own version of performative behavior. She sees the person underneath, and she waits. She doesn't force it. She doesn't demand that Rigby change. She just waits for him to be ready. And eventually, he is. The theory suggests that Eileen represents the kind of love that the show ultimately endorses. Not the passionate, dramatic love of Mordecai and Margaret's relationship. Not the volatile, unpredictable love of Mordecai and CJ's relationship, but the quiet, patient, steady love that persists through everything. The love that shows up. The love that waits. And in the finale's epilogue, Eileen and Rigby have children together. They built a life, and the theory notes that their relationship is the only romantic relationship in the show that survives from beginning to end without a major crisis. They're the proof of concept. They're the show saying, this is what works, not fireworks, not drama, patience and presence, and the willingness to love someone who isn't ready yet. I find Eileen's role in Rigby's graduation day special particularly moving in this context. She's there for his graduation. She's proud of him. And when the park launches into space, she's with him. She followed him into the unknown. She didn't have to. She's not a park employee. But she went anyway, because that's what you do when you love someone. You go where they go, even if where they go turns out to be outer space. And here's the thing that strikes me most about Eileen's role in the series. In a show where every character has a theory about their hidden depths, about what they're really going through beneath the surface, Eileen might be the only character who is exactly who she appears to be. She's not hiding anything. She's not wearing a mask. She's not performing. She's just Eileen. Quiet, smart, kind, present. And maybe the theory about Eileen isn't really a theory at all. Maybe it's just an observation. In a world of complex, layered, conflicted characters, sometimes the most radical thing you can be is simple. Sometimes being uncomplicated is its own kind of depth. But I'm not done. Not even close. Because there's a whole category of regular show theories we haven't touched yet, and these might be the most fun to talk about. These are the episode-specific theories, the ones that take individual episodes and crack them open like puzzle boxes. And I want to go through several of them, because I think they show you just how much depth is packed into every 11 minutes of this show. Let's start with It's Time. This is Season 2, Episode 2, and it aired on January 3rd, 2011. And it is, in my opinion, one of the darkest episodes regular show ever produced. Here's what happens. Mordecai is jealous that Rigby is flirting with Margaret. He can't handle it. So he fills a microwave with clocks, which somehow creates a time vortex. And while Mordecai and Rigby are riding through this time vortex on the microwave, they get into a physical fight. Rigby shoves Mordecai. Mordecai shoves Rigby back. And Rigby falls off the microwave and is killed. Disintegrated. Gone. And here's the thing that really gets me about this episode. Mordecai killed his best friend. Yes, it was in the heat of the moment. Yes, Rigby shoved first. Yes, the supernatural circumstances made it possible. But strip away the sci-fi elements, and what you have is a story about jealousy leading to violence, leading to death. Mordecai was so consumed by his feelings for Margaret, so threatened by the idea that someone else might have what he wants, that he lashed out and destroyed the most important relationship in his life. Father Time intervenes. He shows Mordecai his memories, forces him to confront his jealousy, and eventually allows him to ride a time pony back to the present to undo everything. Rigby lives. The day resets. But the theory about It's Time is that the emotional damage was done, even if the physical damage was undone. Mordecai learned something about himself in that episode that he can't unlearn. He learned that he's capable of violence when threatened. He learned that his jealousy isn't just an inconvenience. It's dangerous. And the theory suggests that this knowledge haunts him throughout the rest of the series. It's why he's so cautious with his feelings. It's why he struggles to commit. He's afraid that if he lets himself feel too strongly, he'll lose control again. And I think that reading is supported by how the show handles Mordecai's emotional life in subsequent seasons. He's never fully present in his relationships. He's always holding back. And while the show doesn't explicitly reference It's Time as the reason, The theory argues that this is the formative trauma that defines Mordecai's approach to love. He killed someone he loved because he felt too much, and he responded by trying never to feel that much again. That's an incredibly dark reading of a character from a Cartoon Network show. And I love it because it treats the show's supernatural elements as real events with real psychological consequences, not as consequence-free adventures that reset at the end of each episode. If Mordecai really lived through killing Rigby, even temporarily, even with a time reversal, that experience changed him. You don't walk away from that unchanged. And speaking of episodes that are darker than they appear, let's talk about Terror Tales of the Park. This is the franchise of annual Halloween specials that Regular Show produced from Season 3 all the way through Season 8. The first one aired on October 10th, 2011, and they became a beloved tradition, with the park crew sitting around telling scary stories. The theory about the Terror Tales episodes is fascinating because it's structural rather than thematic. The theory argues that the Terror Tales episodes are the only episodes in Regular Show where the characters are allowed to be honest about their fears. In the regular episodes, the supernatural threats are external. Demons attack. Portals open. The universe goes haywire. The characters react to threats that come from outside. But in the Terror Tales episodes, the characters tell stories about what scares them. And those stories are internal. They're about the characters' own fears, anxieties, and neuroses, projected onto horror movie frameworks. So when Rigby tells a terror tale about being trapped in a house that's alive and trying to eat him, the theory says that's Rigby expressing his fear of being consumed by something he can't control. When Mordecai tells a terror tale about a cursed videotape, that's Mordecai expressing his anxiety about technology and communication, and the way the things we watch shape who we become. The horror tales aren't just fun Halloween episodes. They're therapy sessions. They're the characters processing their deepest fears in the only way the show's format allows, through metaphor and story. And I think this reading is especially powerful when you consider that these episodes happen every year. Every Halloween, the characters sit down and tell each other what they're afraid of. And as the series progresses, the stories get darker, the fears get more specific, the metaphors get more personal. By the final Terror Tales in Season 8, the stories are no longer about generic scary stuff. They're about the end of everything. They're about loss and isolation and the void, because the characters have changed. They've grown, and their fears have grown with them. Let me get into another episode theory that I think is really smart. It's about Appreciation Day, Season 2, Episode 3. In this episode, Mordecai and Rigby discover that Benson has written negative things about them in the park's book of records. So they sneak in and rewrite their entries to make themselves look better. But the book of records is magical, and whatever is written in it becomes true. So their false accomplishments start manifesting as real tasks they have to complete. The theory about this episode is that it's a direct commentary on revisionist history. The idea that you can change the narrative about yourself, that you can rewrite the record to make your past look better. And the consequence of doing so is that reality shifts to accommodate the lie. Mordecai and Rigby didn't change who they were. They changed what was written about them, and the universe adjusted to match the new story. The theory extends this to a broader point about identity. We all curate our histories. We all choose which stories to tell about ourselves and which to leave out. Social media is essentially the book of records. We write our own entries and present them as truth. And the show's warning is that this kind of self-mythology has consequences. When you tell a false story about yourself, you create obligations you can't meet. The lie becomes a standard you have to live up to. And when you can't live up to it, everything falls apart. I think this reading is especially relevant today, in 2026, in a world where everyone is their own narrator, and the distance between who we are and who we present ourselves as has never been wider. Regular Show made this point in 2011 in an 11-minute episode about a magical book. And it's more true now than it was then. Let me talk about something that I've been chewing on throughout this entire video, and it's about the way Regular Show handles masculinity. Because there's a theory that the show is one of the most thoughtful explorations of male identity in animation, and I think it deserves serious attention. Think about the male characters in Regular Show. Mordecai is a blue jay who can't express his emotions directly. He freezes when he talks to women. He deflects compliments. He avoids confrontation, except when he's so overwhelmed that he explodes. Rigby compensates for his insecurities by being loud and obnoxious. Muscle Man performs hypermasculinity as a defense mechanism, with the crude jokes, the bragging, the physical displays. Benson channels everything into work and control. Skips bottles up centuries of grief behind stoic silence. And the theory argues that each of these characters represents a different way that men are taught to handle their emotions, all of which are ultimately inadequate. Mordecai suppresses. Rigby deflects. Muscle Man performs. Benson controls. Skips endures. None of them, at the start of the series, have a healthy relationship with their own feelings. And the show's arc, for all of them, is about learning to feel things without the armor, learning to be vulnerable. The evidence for this is in the show's emotional climaxes. The moments that hit the hardest are always moments of male vulnerability. Mordecai fighting to save Rigby in Excellent, because he can't say he loves him, but he can show it. Muscle Man crying over his father's death because the "my mom" jokes don't work anymore. Rigby earning his diploma because he finally stopped running from his own inadequacy. Skips telling his story because the silence became too heavy. Benson softening, season by season, because the anger wasn't protecting him from anything. The theory suggests that Regular Show is fundamentally a show about men learning to feel. And it does this without being preachy, without lecturing, without ever making the characters aware that they're on a journey of emotional development. It just shows you. It shows you what it looks like when men slowly, painfully learn to take off their armor. And it makes it look brave and funny and heartbreaking and real. And here's where this theory connects to the show's audience. Regular Show's primary demographic is young men, teenagers and 20-somethings who are right in the middle of figuring out what kind of man they want to be. And the show provides models, not of what masculinity should look like, but of what the journey toward healthy masculinity looks like. It's messy. It's slow. It involves a lot of mistakes, but it's possible. Mordecai figures it out. Rigby figures it out. Muscle Man figures it out. And if they can do it, the show gently suggests maybe you can too. I actually think this is one of the most important things Regular Show ever did. And it's the thing I would most want people to take away from this video. The show isn't just about growing up in the general sense. It's about growing up as a man, specifically, in a culture that doesn't always teach men how to do that well. And it handles it with more grace, more nuance, and more empathy than almost anything else I've ever seen. Okay, let me shift into some territory that we haven't covered yet, and I think it's going to open up some really interesting theory conversations. Let's talk about Regular Show, the movie. The Regular Show movie came out in 2015, and it reveals something about Mordecai and Rigby's past that changes the way you look at their entire friendship. In the movie, we learn that Mordecai and Rigby met in high school, that Mordecai was on track to get into a prestigious art college, and that Rigby sabotaged Mordecai's chances because he was jealous and afraid of losing his friend. Rigby sent a rejection letter to the college using Mordecai's name, and Mordecai never found out until the movie. The theory about this revelation is that it recontextualizes the entire power dynamic between Mordecai and Rigby. Throughout the series, Mordecai is positioned as the more talented, more capable, more together of the two. And Rigby is the screw-up, the liability, the one who drags Mordecai down. But the movie reveals that this dynamic exists because Rigby created it. Rigby sabotaged Mordecai's future, which trapped Mordecai in the same dead-end life that Rigby was always going to live. They're both at the park, both groundskeepers, both going nowhere, because Rigby made sure that Mordecai couldn't go anywhere else. And the theory asks, does Rigby's betrayal change how you feel about their friendship? Because on one hand, what Rigby did is unforgivable. He destroyed his best friend's chance at a better life because he was afraid of being left alone. That's not friendship. That's sabotage. That's controlling someone else's destiny because of your own insecurity. But on the other hand, and this is the part that the theory really leans into, isn't this what we all do on some level to the people we love? Don't we all, sometimes, hold people back because we're afraid of what happens if they leave? Don't we all, sometimes, prioritize our own comfort over someone else's growth. Rigby's betrayal is extreme, but the emotion behind it, the terror of abandonment, the desperation to keep things the same, that's universal. And the show's resolution of this is interesting. Mordecai finds out. He's furious. They fight, but ultimately, they forgive each other. Not because what Rigby did was okay, but because the friendship matters more than the betrayal. And that forgiveness isn't easy or automatic. It's hard, and it's painful, and it requires Mordecai to accept that his best friend is deeply, fundamentally flawed. But he does it, because that's what real friendship looks like. It's not about finding a perfect person. It's about choosing to stay with an imperfect one. The theory argues that the movie is the most important piece of regular show canon for understanding the Mordecai/Rigby dynamic. Everything else in the show, every conflict, every moment of tension, every time Rigby does something stupid and Mordecai gets frustrated, all of it exists in the shadow of this original betrayal. They're not just friends who annoy each other. They're friends whose relationship is built on a lie. And the show's arc is about that lie being revealed, confronted, and ultimately transcended. I think the movie doesn't get enough credit in theory discussions. People tend to focus on the TV series and treat the movie as a side story, but I think it's the key to everything. Without the movie, Mordecai and Rigby's friendship is a funny, heartwarming portrayal of two buddies. With the movie, it becomes something much darker and much more honest. It becomes a friendship that survived betrayal, and that's a different thing entirely. While we're on the topic of hidden depths in seemingly simple relationships, let me bring up something that I've been noticing on my most recent rewatch of the series, and it has to do with Benson and Pops. Benson and Pops have a fascinating dynamic that I don't think gets talked about enough. Benson is the park manager. Pops is the park owner's son. In theory, Pops outranks Benson. In practice, Benson is the one who runs things, who makes decisions, who keeps the park functioning. And Pops just exists. He wanders around. He enjoys things. He's happy. The theory is that Benson resents Pops, and that this resentment is one of the show's most subtle and most tragic emotional threads. Benson works himself to exhaustion every day. He stresses about budgets and schedules and employees who won't listen. He's given up his dreams and his health and his personal life for this job. And right there, in the same building, is Pops, who has never worked a day in his life, who inherited his position through pure luck, and who is effortlessly happy while Benson drowns in responsibility. And here's the thing. Benson can't express that resentment because Pops is too kind. You can't be angry at Pops. It would be like being angry at a puppy. Pops hasn't done anything wrong. He's not rubbing his privilege in anyone's face. He's genuinely, authentically joyful. And that genuine joy, in the face of Benson's genuine misery, might be the most painful thing Benson has to endure every day. But the theory also suggests that Benson loves Pops deeply. Because despite everything, despite the frustration and the resentment and the unfairness of their positions, Pops is one of the few people who treats Benson with genuine kindness. Pops doesn't judge. He doesn't criticize. He just likes Benson for who he is. And for a man who feels constantly undervalued and unappreciated, that simple acceptance might be the thing that keeps him going. And in the finale, when Pops sacrifices himself, I've always thought Benson's reaction is one of the most interesting in the group, because Benson loses two things at once. He loses a friend, someone who treated him with kindness, but he also loses the person whose effortless joy was both his torment and his inspiration. And I think that dual loss, that complicated grief, is something the show trusts the audience to feel without explaining it. Okay, I want to go deeper into something that I touched on earlier, but didn't fully explore, because I think it deserves its own section. The theory about the show's voice cast and what their performances reveal about the characters. J.G. Quintel voices Mordecai. This is the show's creator giving voice to his protagonist. And the theory is that Quintel's personal connection to Mordecai, the fact that he literally speaks through this character, adds a layer of autobiography to every scene. When Mordecai is confused about his future, is that Quintel's own confusion about where his show is going? When Mordecai can't express his feelings, is that Quintel working through his own emotional patterns? I don't know. But the fact that the question can be asked, the fact that the creator and the character share a voice, creates an intimacy, that most animated shows don't have. William Salyers voices Rigby, and he brings something to the character that I think is underappreciated. Rigby could so easily be annoying. He's loud, he's selfish, he's constantly causing problems. But Salyers gives him this underlying vulnerability, this desperate need to be loved, that makes you care about him even when he's at his worst. There's a crack in Rigby's voice, a wobble, that shows up when the character is scared or sad, and it's absolutely devastating. It takes a talented actor to make you feel sorry for someone who just destroyed the world because he didn't want to clean his room. And then there's Sam Marin. Sam Marin voices Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man. 3 characters, 1 actor, and these characters could not be more different. Benson is tight and controlled and angry. Pops is light and breathy and joyful. Muscle Man is brash and loud and crude. And Marin makes each of them feel like a completely different person. The theory notes that having 1 actor voice 3 main characters creates an unconscious connection between them. On some level, your brain recognizes that these 3 voices are coming from the same person, and that recognition makes the characters feel like aspects of a single consciousness. Benson's anger, Pops' innocence, Muscle Man's bravado, they're all responses to the same world, filtered through different emotional lenses. And Mark Hamill as Skips. Luke Skywalker voices the immortal Yeti. And there's something perfect about that casting. Something that goes beyond just being a cool piece of trivia. Hamill is an actor who knows what it's like to be defined by a single role, to carry the weight of a character for decades, to watch time pass while a fictional version of yourself remains static. That's Skips. Skips is frozen in time, while everyone around him changes. And Hamill brings an understanding to that experience that comes from actually living something similar. When Skips sounds tired, when Skips sounds like he's carrying the weight of centuries, I think part of what you're hearing is Hamill channeling his own relationship with fame and permanence. Let me push into another area of theory that I find endlessly fascinating, and it's about the show's treatment of nostalgia as an emotion rather than just an aesthetic. We talked earlier about the 80s references and what they mean on a structural level, but I want to go deeper into the emotional function of nostalgia in regular show, because I think the show has something specific to say about it. Nostalgia, at its core, is grief. It's grief for a time that's gone. It's the sadness of remembering something beautiful and knowing you can't go back to it. And regular show is one of the most nostalgic shows ever made. The 80s music, the VHS tapes, the arcade games, the montages, the synth scores, all of it is designed to evoke a feeling of loss, a longing for something that existed before the characters were born, and that they're somehow still connected to. The theory is that regular show uses nostalgia as a drug, not a recreational drug, like the acid trip theory suggests. An analgesic, a painkiller. When things get hard, when emotions get too intense, the show retreats into nostalgia. It fires up a synth track and lets the characters have a montage. And for a few seconds, everything is beautiful and simple and safe. And then the montage ends and reality comes crashing back. The problem hasn't been solved. The pain hasn't gone away. But for those few seconds, it felt like it had. And I think that's incredibly honest about how nostalgia actually works. We use nostalgia to escape the present. We look backward because looking forward is too scary. We romanticize the past because the future is uncertain, and regular show acknowledges this pattern without condemning it. The show doesn't say nostalgia is bad. It says nostalgia is human. It's a coping mechanism. It's how we survive the difficulty of being alive. But here's where the theory gets really interesting. By the end of the series, the nostalgia starts to recede. The 80s references become less frequent. The montages become less common. The show's visual and auditory language evolves past the 80s aesthetic and into something more contemporary, more forward-looking. And the theory argues that this transition represents the characters finally letting go of the past. They've been using nostalgia as a shield for 8 seasons. And at the end, they put the shield down. They face the future unprotected. And that's terrifying and beautiful and necessary, because that's what growing up is, ultimately. It's putting down the shield of nostalgia and accepting that the past is over. Not forgetting it, not dismissing it, but accepting that it's done and that the present is where you live now. and regular show's final season, with its space setting and its cosmic stakes and its forward momentum, is the show practicing what it's been preaching for 8 years. Let go. Move forward. The past was a jolly good show, but it's over. There's a connected theory about the show's music that I want to touch on, because I think it adds to this conversation. Regular show made extensive use of licensed songs, mostly from the 1980s, starting with the pilot. Quintel has talked about how the staff would record animatics using copyrighted songs for the montage scenes, and then they'd try to get the licenses. And when they couldn't get a specific song, they'd commission original music that captured the same feeling. The theory is that the choice to use real, licensed songs rather than just original compositions was a deliberate strategy to anchor the show's emotions in the listener's existing memories. When a regular show montage uses a real 80s song, a song that the viewer might have heard before, in a car, at a party, in a movie, the show is borrowing the emotional associations that come with that song. It's piggybacking on the listener's personal nostalgia. The song doesn't just score the scene, it connects the scene to the viewer's own past. And that's a really clever trick, because it means that every viewer's experience of a regular show montage is slightly different. The same 80s song triggers different memories for different people, and those personal memories blend with the on-screen images to create a hybrid emotion that's unique to each viewer. You're not just watching Mordecai have a moment, you're having your own moment at the same time. And that dual experience, the character's story and your story happening simultaneously, is what makes regular shows' emotional moments feel so personal. When Quintel wanted to get Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo to do the music for the pilot, and Mothersbaugh agreed after seeing the animatic, that wasn't just a cool piece of production trivia. It was a statement of intent. Devo is 80s. Devo is iconic. Devo is the sound of a specific era and a specific feeling. And having Mothersbaugh compose music for the show was like getting the 80s to officially endorse regular show as its spiritual successor. Alright, I want to talk about some theories that deal with the show's structure in a more meta way, because there are patterns in regular show that I think reveal something about how the show was made and what it was trying to do on a level that goes beyond individual episodes. The escalation scale theory. This is a theory I came up with on my own, and I want to see if you agree with it. The theory is that across the entire series, the scale of escalation in each episode gradually increases. Season 1 episodes tend to escalate to threats that affect the park. By Season 3, episodes are escalating to threats that affect the city or the dimension. By Season 6, episodes are escalating to threats that affect the planet. And by Season 8, the escalation has reached its logical endpoint. The universe itself is at stake. And the theory is that this gradual increase in scale mirrors the characters' growing awareness of their place in the world. In Season 1, Mordecai and Rigby's world is small. The park is everything. A problem at the park is the biggest problem they can imagine. But as they grow, as they learn more about themselves and the world around them, their world expands, and the problems expand with it. By the time they're in space, dealing with cosmic entities and universal resets, they've grown enough to handle stakes that would have been incomprehensible to their Season 1 selves. This is the show's version of leveling up. Like the video game theory we discussed earlier, the characters are progressing through increasingly difficult levels. But unlike a video game, they're not getting stronger because they found a power-up. They're getting stronger because they grew up, they matured. They developed emotional resilience and interpersonal skills, and the ability to face fear without running away. And that growth, that earned strength, is what allows them to face the universe-ending threat of the finale without falling apart. I think this theory is one of the most elegant readings of the show's structure because it ties together so many other threads. The escalation formula, the character growth, the shift from episodic to serialized storytelling, the space setting of Season 8, all of it makes sense as a single, coherent trajectory. The show got bigger because the characters got bigger, and the characters got bigger because they grew up. Here's another structural theory that I find really compelling. The two halves theory. This theory argues that regular show naturally divides into two halves, Seasons 1 through 4 and Seasons 5 through 8. And the dividing line is Stake Me Amadeus, the season 4 finale where Margaret leaves. The first half of the show, seasons 1 through 4, is defined by stasis. The characters don't change much. The episodes are self-contained. The status quo resets at the end of each episode. Mordecai pines for Margaret, but nothing happens. Rigby is a slacker and stays a slacker. Benson yells and nothing changes. The show is a comedy with emotional moments. The second half, seasons 5 through 8, is defined by momentum. Characters start changing. Relationships develop and end. Rigby goes back to school. Muscle Man gets married. Thomas is revealed to be a spy. The park goes to space. The show transforms from a comedy with emotional moments into an emotional drama with comedic elements. And the theory argues that Stake Me Amadeus is the hinge point because it's the first time the show permanently changes its status quo. Margaret leaves. She doesn't come back at the end of the episode. The world is different now, and once the show proves that it can change, that things don't have to reset, everything opens up. The characters are free to grow, the stories are free to evolve, and the show becomes something much bigger than what it was. I think this theory is supported by the tonal shift that happens around season 5. The humor gets darker, the emotions get heavier, the episodes get longer and more complex, and the characters start making choices that have lasting consequences. The show is no longer content to be a comedy. It wants to be something more. And Stake Me Amadeus, with its heartbreaking final scene of Margaret walking away in tears, is the moment when the show decides to become that something more. Let me touch on a few more theories that I think are worth discussing before we start bringing everything together. The Garrett Bobby Ferguson theory. Garrett Bobby Ferguson is the giant floating head who appears in the season 1 episode Rage Against the TV and later episodes. He's obsessed with high scores and video game records. And the theory is that GBF represents the futility of achievement without purpose. He has the highest score in the universe. He's the best at something that doesn't matter. And when Mordecai and Rigby beat his record, he literally explodes. Because his entire identity was built on a number that someone else eventually surpassed. The theory extends GBF to a commentary on competitive culture, on the obsession with being the best, on the way we attach our self-worth to measurable achievements. GBF is the logical endpoint of that mindset. He's a giant head with no body, no life, no relationships, no purpose except a number on a screen. And when the number changes, he has nothing left. He's a warning. Don't be the giant head. And his son, Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., who appears in Exit 9B, represents the inheritance of toxic ambition. GBF Jr. didn't earn his father's record. He inherited his father's grudge. He's fighting for something that was never his, that never mattered, because that's what his father taught him to value. And the theory argues that this father-son dynamic is a dark mirror of the Pops/Mr. Maillard relationship. Both fathers shaped their sons, but Mr. Maillard shaped Pops with love and protection, and GBF shaped his son with obsession and rage. Same structure, opposite outcomes. And the show doesn't tell you which one is the right way to parent. It just shows you both and lets you decide. Here's another theory that I want to bring up because it connects to the show's treatment of technology. And I think it's an area where regular show was ahead of its time. The theory about the magical objects. Throughout the series, Mordecai and Rigby encounter magical objects that grant them power. The keyboard in The Power, the hot dogs in various episodes, the video games that come to life, the tapes and CDs and synthesizers that have supernatural properties. And the theory is that these magical objects are all technology. They're all machines. And the theory argues that regular show is saying something specific about the relationship between humans and technology. That every tool has the potential to become a trap. The keyboard gives you power, but it takes away your control. The video games are fun, but they can literally kill you. The VHS tapes record everything, but degrade over time. Each magical object in regular show represents a different aspect of technology's double-edged nature. The promise of enhancement paired with the threat of dependency, and the character's relationship with these objects mirrors our own relationship with technology. The way we use tools that we don't fully understand. The way we become dependent on things that can turn against us. The way we treat power as a substitute for effort. I think this reading is especially relevant now. We're living in a world where technology promises to solve every problem and creates new problems with every solution. Regular Show saw that pattern in 2010 and turned it into a storytelling engine. Every magical object is a smartphone. Every escalation is a software update gone wrong. And every resolution, where the characters destroy the object and go back to doing things the hard way, is a reminder that the simplest solution is usually the one you earn yourself. Let me also talk about a theory that I think ties into the show's understanding of family, because Regular Show has a lot to say about families, even though it doesn't look like a show about families on the surface. Think about the families we meet in Regular Show. Rigby's family, a younger brother who's taller, more successful, and more charismatic, and parents we barely see. Muscle Man's family, a father who lied about his career because he was ashamed, a mother who's the butt of every joke, but who is treated with genuine love when she actually appears. Mordecai's family, almost entirely absent. Benson's family, never mentioned. Pop's family, an adoptive father who raised a cosmic entity and never told him the truth. Skip's family, all dead. The theory is that Regular Show is a show about found family. The characters who can't find what they need in their biological families find it at the park. The park crew becomes the family that each of them is missing. Mordecai and Rigby are brothers. Benson is the father figure, strict but caring. Skips is the grandfather, wise and distant, but always there when you need him. Pops is the innocent child everyone protects. Muscle Man and High Five Ghost are the inseparable siblings. And Mr. Maillard is the absent patriarch whose shadow hangs over everything. And the theory argues that this found family is the show's real thesis. More than growing up, more than accountability, more than the escalation formula, the show is about the families we choose. The people who become important to us, not because of blood or obligation, but because of shared experience. The park crew has been through things together that no one else would believe. They've fought demons and traveled through time and gone to space. And those shared experiences bonded them into something stronger than a biological family. They chose each other, and they kept choosing each other. Episode after episode, season after season, until choosing each other became the most natural thing in the world. And in the finale's epilogue, when the crew comes back together 25 years later for a reunion, that's the found family returning. They've all moved on. They've all built their own lives, their own biological families. But they come back to the park because the park is where their real family lives, not in the buildings or the grounds, in each other, in the memory of what they shared, in the acknowledgement that these are the people who mattered most. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Regular Show's ending. It doesn't end with the cosmic battle. It doesn't end with the sacrifice. It ends with a barbecue, with old friends catching up, with people who love each other, choosing to be in the same place at the same time. That's not a dramatic ending, but it might be the most honest one, because that's what family actually looks like. It looks like showing up. Let me talk about one more theory category that I think deserves attention before we start wrapping up. The theories about what Regular Show means for the future of animation. We touched on this briefly with the Cartoon Network Renaissance discussion, but I want to go deeper because Regular Show's influence on animation is, I think, much larger than most people realize. Before Regular Show, animated comedy for young audiences was mostly divided into two categories. There were the slapstick shows, where the humor came from physical gags and silly voices. And there were the smart shows, where the humor came from clever writing and cultural references. What Regular Show did was create a third category, the emotional comedy. A show where the humor comes from character-driven situations that are simultaneously funny and meaningful, where a joke about failing to set up chairs is also a statement about the fear of growing up, where a "my mom" gag is also a window into the insecurity of the person telling it. The theory is that Regular Show's legacy isn't in its specific style or its specific characters. It's in the permission it gave to future creators. It proved that animated shows could be funny and sad at the same time. It proved that characters could be cartoons and still have realistic emotional lives. It proved that a show could have fart jokes and genuine philosophical depth, and that neither one undermined the other. And you can see this influence everywhere in shows that came after. In the way animated series now treat their characters as complete emotional beings, rather than joke delivery systems. In the way even the most comedic animated shows now feel comfortable having episodes that make you cry. Regular Show didn't invent emotional animation, but it normalized it. It made it mainstream, and the landscape of animated television is fundamentally different because of it. There's also the question of what the recently announced regular show revival means for these theories. Regular show, The Lost Tapes, is set to premiere on Cartoon Network, with Quintel returning as showrunner and Mark Hamill confirmed to return as Skips. And the theories about what this revival could mean are fascinating. If the revival takes place after the epilogue, it could validate or invalidate several theories we've discussed. If the characters are older, if the park is different, if the world has moved on, then the theories about stasis and purgatory become historical rather than ongoing. The characters escaped. They grew up. The cycle is broken. But if the revival reveals new information about the show's mythology, about Pops' sacrifice, about the cosmic cycle, about what happened between the finale and the epilogue, then some theories might become more relevant than ever. What if the universe didn't stay fixed? What if the cycle is still running? What if Pops' sacrifice was temporary? These are questions that the revival could answer. Or it could introduce new questions that nobody has thought to ask yet. I'm genuinely excited about the revival, not just as a fan, but as someone who's spent way too long thinking about what regular show means. Because every new piece of canonical information changes the theoretical landscape. And changing the theoretical landscape means changing the conversation, which means more nights like this one, where we sit together and try to figure out what this beautiful, strange, surprising show is really about. All right, we've covered an enormous amount of ground tonight, and I want to start bringing things together. But before I do, there are a few more theories I want to touch on, because I think they're important to the complete picture. The everything is connected theory. This one is meta. The theory argues that every theory we've discussed tonight, the acid trip, the purgatory, the cosmic cycle, the character psychology, all of it is part of a single, unified reading of regular show. The theory suggests that the show was designed to be read on multiple levels simultaneously, that it's not just a comedy, or just a drama, or just a cosmic mythology, but all of those things at once. And what makes the show work so well, according to this theory, is that you can enter at any level and find a complete, satisfying story. If you watch regular show as a comedy, you get over 260 episodes of hilarious, supernatural hijinks. If you watch it as a drama, you get a deeply emotional story about growing up and letting go. If you watch it as a mythology, you get a cosmic narrative about the nature of good and evil and the cycle of existence. If you watch it as a character study, you get some of the most nuanced, most human portrayals in animation history. And if you watch it as all of these things simultaneously, you get something that I think is genuinely unique in the history of television. A show that is simple on the surface and infinite underneath. And the theory argues that this multi-layered quality is what makes regular show a great show rather than just a good one. Good shows work on one level. Great shows work on every level. And regular show, for all its apparent simplicity, for all its 11-minute runtime and its fart jokes and its my mom gags, works on every single level you care to look at. There's a fan theory that I want to end the theory section with, because I think it's the most important one. It's not about plot or characters or mythology. It's about you. About the person watching this video right now. The theory is that regular show was designed for rewatching, not just in the it's entertaining enough to watch again sense, but in the it reveals different things depending on where you are in your life sense. If you watched regular show as a teenager, you related to Mordecai and Rigby. They were your age. They were going through what you were going through, and the show was a comedy. A really good comedy with some surprisingly emotional moments, but fundamentally a comedy. But if you rewatch regular show in your 20s, something changes. You start relating to Benson. You understand his frustration. You understand what it's like to be responsible for people who won't take things seriously. You understand what it's like to have given up on a dream and not be sure you made the right choice. And the show becomes a drama. A sad, beautiful drama disguised as a comedy. And if you rewatch it again later, in your 30s or 40s, the theory suggests that you'll relate to Skips. You'll understand what it's like to have seen things, to have lost things, to carry weight that nobody around you fully understands. You'll understand patience and loyalty and the quiet heroism of showing up every day, even when you know how the story ends. And if you ever watch it with your kids, you'll relate to Pops. You'll understand the desire to protect innocence, the fear of what the world will do to the people you love, and the courage it takes to let them face it anyway. The theory argues that regular show is a show you grow into, that it gets better as you get older, not because the show changes, but because you do. And each time you return to it, you find a new layer waiting for you, a layer that wasn't there before because you weren't ready to see it. I think that's the most powerful theory about regular show that exists. Not because it's the most evidence-based or the most intellectually rigorous, but because it's the most true. Regular show is a show about growing up. And growing up is something you never stop doing. And every time you revisit this show, you bring a different version of yourself to it. And you find something different waiting for you. And honestly, that's why I keep coming back to it. That's why I'm here at, I don't know, whatever time it is, talking about a cartoon from 2010. Because every time I watch it, I learn something new. Not about the show, about myself. And I think that's what all great art does. It doesn't just entertain you, it reflects you back to yourself. And what you see changes as you change. So here's the question I want to leave you with tonight. And it's not a rhetorical question. It's a real one. I don't have the answer. If Pops is watching regular show on a VHS tape in the afterlife, if the whole show is a story being remembered by a god who gave his life so that his friends could live, then what does it mean that we're watching too? Are we in the afterlife with Pops? Are we watching the same tape? Or are we somewhere else entirely? Watching a copy of a copy, a version of the story that's slightly degraded, slightly fuzzier, slightly further from the original? And here's the part of that question that keeps me up at night. If the tape is degrading, if every rewatch is slightly different from the last, if the story changes a little bit each time, because we change a little bit each time, then is there a real version of regular show? Or is every viewing a unique experience? A new story told to a new audience by a lollipop man in heaven who just wants someone to share it with? I don't know. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I still don't know. But I think the not knowing is the point. I think Quintel ended his show with an unanswerable question. Because that's what good stories do. They don't close every door, they leave one open. And that open door is the reason you come back. It's the reason we're here tonight. It's the reason you'll rewatch this show someday and find something new. That was a lot, I know. And if you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a light video. But I hope it was worth it. I hope some of these theories changed the way you think about regular show. Or at least gave you something to chew on. Because this show deserves to be thought about. It deserves to be analyzed and debated and picked apart and put back together. Because underneath the 80s music and the My Mom jokes and the Gumball Machine boss and the Blue Jay who can't talk to girls, there's one of the most thoughtful, most emotionally intelligent, most quietly ambitious shows ever made. And the theories, all of them, every single one we discussed tonight, they're not reaching. They're responding. They're responding to a show that put more into every episode than most shows put into an entire season. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight, really. Whether you stayed for all of it or drifted in and out, whether you agreed with every theory or thought I was completely wrong, thank you. This is why we do this. This is why Velvo exists. To sit with shows that deserve more than a surface glance and give them the time they're owed. And if you can't sleep, well, that's what the next video is for. And if you haven't subscribed, it really does help us keep making these for you. We'll be here whenever you want to come back. Talking about the shows that matter. Going deeper than anyone thinks is necessary. Because honestly, the depth is the point. So here's my final thought. And it's not a theory. It's just something I believe. Regular Show was a great show. Not because of the cosmic battles, or the supernatural escalation, or the 80s aesthetics. It was a great show because it cared about its characters. It cared about you, the person watching. And it trusted both to be ready for something deeper than the surface suggested. It trusted that a show about two slackers at a park could also be a show about growing up, about loss, about love, about the terrifying, beautiful, inevitable process of becoming who you're supposed to be. Jolly good show, Pops. Jolly good show.